Hello all, I think that's my cue. I'm never actually quite sure when everybody's with us. But welcome. I have 6:15 on Apple time anyway, or maybe 6:16. So I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Brattleboro Select Board for June 2nd, 2020, let's say. And our first official business, which is traditional, is to approve the minutes of May 19th.
Excuse me for interrupting, Tim, just to say that the meeting has been officially warned.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
As you know, I always remember to do that, except right now. Thanks for that, Peter. Having everyone has, of course, studied the minutes of May 19th, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes of May 19th, 2020.
Thank you. Ian has made a motion to approve May 19th minutes. All those in favor, say aye. Raise your hand as well.
Aye.
Yeah, thank you.
Aye.
5-0. And I just want to, let's see, I'm going to try to sneak in our administrative stuff a little bit here and there so that everybody knows the deal. If it's your first time watching, we do ask that if you want to comment during public participation, which is sort of the open forum early in our meeting, so that you can speak about whatever you'd like or ask any questions you'd like for anything that's not on the agenda. Or pretty much after every item, I'll be opening it up for public comment. Feel free to raise your hand, so to speak, in the chat window just by typing in, I'd like to say something, or I have a question and your name. That helps your chair out in sort of lining you up and figuring out what kind of interest we have for people to speak. Otherwise, when we get to the public participation part, I'm kind of like just waiting. And it's great to know in advance that some folks want to talk. Thank you. And yes, I think that's all I'll say there. And so chair's remarks is usually first. I really don't have too many remarks. We have a very full meeting. I did want to just say that, gosh, on the national basis, we are all experiencing quite a bit of emotion. There is so much going on. And I want to just bring it down to the local level and say that I continue to be incredibly impressed with the community here in Brattleboro. We've had two major protests now featuring a lot of people who are justifiably upset by some things happening on the national level. And I just want to say that our town staff, everybody I've been encountering in our community, our police, everyone, our fire department, everyone has been coming together in support of free speech and the justice that everybody is seeking in these increasingly crazy times. And we're dealing with so much on top of our normal crazy, which is COVID-19. And now we have all kinds of unrest in our country. So anyway, that's my remarks. I'll pass it over to manager's comments, please.
I didn't have any prepared for this evening. I'd like to just add one thing to what you just said, Tim, which is in both cases, the organizers of the event coordinated directly with our police department. And we really appreciate that partnership. We're seeing many examples across the country of even some of the larger cities and lots of smaller towns where police departments and people in the community are working in partnership around these issues. And we're fortunate to have that be true here, that there has been communication that has enabled everyone to be able to have these major events and have them remain safe for the whole community, for the participants and for the rest of the community. So we're hopeful that people who may organize additional events would continue to view our police department as a partner and as folks that they can work together with around these kinds of major gatherings. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Absolutely. And I'll just remind people once again that if you're interested in the upcoming public participation part, which is to speak to anything that's not on our agenda currently, it's a busy meeting. We are going to be holding it to 2 minutes or so, if we can. because we're so much to do tonight. And thank you. And the next order of business is just to hear from my 4 fellow board members, any kind of committee reports or comments that you might have. And I have almost split-second raising of hands. Daniel first, if you'd like.
I just wanted to publicly state my gratitude for Chief Fitzgerald's op-ed in the Reformer the other day. You know, I appreciated its honesty. And I also think that at a moment like this, you know, we can't stay silent, even when what we have to say is complicated. And, you know, as white people in a 99 or whatever it is % white state, our role as allies is sometimes hard to navigate, and it's not always clear what the best path is. But I think that honest public reflection, especially those of us that have positions of you know, public trust and public power, is really, really important. And I just want to commend Chief Fitzgerald on that. And I think that, you know, continuing to have an open, honest dialogue in the community is the way that, you know, is the way I've seen us do business, and I hope it's the way that we continue to do business.
Thank you. Brandy?
I just wanted to say thank you to Brattleboro Solidarity for being one of the organizers of Saturday's rally. I was unable to attend that one. I did attend the one today that was organized by students from our high school, and it was passionate and it was well attended. And I'm very grateful for the amount of people that showed up to protest the murder of George Floyd. Yeah. And yeah, good job on both fronts. I have to say I was really, really proud of the high school students today, because it's a big undertaking and there was a lot of people there. I have no idea what the final count was, but it was huge.
Thanks, Brandy. Ian, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to also show some gratitude towards the organizers and also the town for Sunday's demonstration or protest. My partner and I participated, and you know, it just reminded me again why I'm so happy I live in Brattleboro, and I want to just encourage that kind of discourse and respect to continue as we move forward and show solidarity and support for people across this country during this really trying time.
Thank you, Ian. And Liz, I think you're the only one left if you have anything to say. No pressure.
I was at Sundays, and I thought it was really very well organized, and you know, I appreciated you know, the sidewalk chalk with the names of all the, you know, fallen. There was a lot of interesting details and a lot to learn from being at the march. And again, I'm also happy to be in Brattleboro.
Thank you. Next, we have public participation. I don't see anybody who's contacted us via chat.
I'm not hearing you.
Is everyone else hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Liz? Oh. I've done that before, where you plug your and you don't know why you don't. So that's easy to do. Thank you. I thought that was. And as you were killing time, thank you, Liz. Someone does want to speak, and that's Andrea Watkins. If you don't mind me using your name, it now appears on the screen too. But, go right ahead.
Yes, that's fine to use my name. I just wanted to follow on about the comments about Chief Fitzgerald's letter to the reformer, which I was very appreciative of. But I feel like there's still questions unanswered that citizens of every municipality that hires a police force need to be asking right now. Needed to be asking years ago, but we should definitely be asking now. I would like to ask Brattleboro to set up a more inclusive dialogue with him, some sort of forum. In particular, my question was about what we're doing to make sure that we're only even hiring in people to the police force that have the right characteristics, the right morals to be a police officer, because his letter addresses ongoing training, but the absolute brutality and callousness that we've seen over the past few weeks, I don't think can be trained out of anyone. So I would like to understand, since, you know, as a taxpayer, I'm paying these people's salary too, as we all are. What are we doing to hire the right people in the first place? And I realize you have a full agenda and this is not a one evening conversation, but I would like the select board as our representatives to carry on this dialogue.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, and I mean, I happen to know some details about Chief Fitzgerald's very proactive hiring practices, but I don't think we can go into too much details here. I don't know if Peter, you want to chime in at all, but I just wanted to remind people that there is a citizens police committee that we actually often look for people to participate in, and often there are slots. And that committee is sort of a direct dialogue, ongoing way to communicate with the police department and have sort of a two-way dialogue with them. Certainly not ruling out a forum or a discussion with Chief Fitzgerald. Peter, did you want to say anything?
The chief is probably on the line, and we could ask him to come in and speak to this in more detail if you'd like that. What I could say on his behalf in summary is the hiring process is rigorous, and the values of the department as expressed by the chief in the piece that was in the paper are what guide that process. And we haven't been at full staffing for quite a few years now. And the reason why is because we don't just hire police officers to fill slots. We make sure that we're hiring police officers that are prepared to be engaged with the community and positively engaged with the community. Not, we don't, the piece that the chief referred to, parlance in police training about the difference between a guardian role of a police officer and the warrior role of a police officer when things get disrupted. And all of the emphasis of the hiring and the training in the Brattleboro Police Department is as guardians, and all of the interaction that we have with the community is geared towards that, in the hopes that we never, and it's true that we almost never, have to have the police act in that more restoring order kind of manner. So, you know, some of the drug interdiction work that they do, for instance, and so there's certain other times in their work that's very challenging in that regard. But here's the chief coming on to speak for himself about the hiring process. But the emphasis is always on that mission statement and the values. Chief.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you. That was a great question. And obviously we never know what truly is in someone's heart, but that is not lack of trying. The town manager was absolutely correct. our background investigation is very, very lengthy and very in-depth. And some of the questions we ask, like at our boards, are, what have you done for your community without asking for anything in return? And you can tell what a person thinks about their community if they start rattling off all these volunteer programs that they took part in and things of that nature. And if you get stunned silence, then you know you have someone that hopefully is not just telling you what you want to hear to get a job. And that's what we try to weed out. And it is absolutely correct. We're short-staffed, not because of lack of applicants, but because of lack of applicants that we want on our team and to police the town of Brattleboro. And I understand your time is really short and you do have a very full agenda, but I'd be more than happy to sit down with the community and a forum and just basically talk about what we look for in the moral character and values of our officers, how we ensure that they maintain the standards we are looking for, and how we work with the community to keep that dialogue and partnership going strong.
Thank you very much, Chief. Oh, sorry. Andrea, I don't think we can hear you at the moment. I think Andrea might be, actually, I can't hear Andrea.
I can't either.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, we still can't hear you. I'm not sure. It looks like your microphone is on from what I can tell, but unfortunately we can't hear you. But at least from your facial expressions, I can kind of tell you were trying to communicate a positive response. I don't know if that's something that Patrick can help us with, but I do see your microphone is green. In the meantime, if you're working on that, let me just ask if there is a phone caller, I think, on the line. And oh, Andrea says, thank you, and I will follow up with the chief directly. Thanks. I like to repeat those and it's in chat because it doesn't reach the record if not. And I was just told the caller is off, so I don't have to be concerned about the caller. So thanks, Andrea and everybody. I think since I don't have anybody else raising their hand, we will move on because we do have a pretty packed agenda. One thing I neglected to do is sort of give a agenda adjustment announcement. Our next in line is to become liquor commissioners to address a second-class liquor license request from Retreat Farm. That request, at least for the moment, has been withdrawn. So we don't have to become liquor commissioners, folks. And we will see what happens with them in the future. And next on the agenda is water and sewer commissioners. We have some business to attend to here. So do I have a motion to become water and sewer commissioners? From anyone?
So moved.
Thank you.
Man, we got stuff to do. Come on, let's get to it.
Daniel has made a motion to become water and sewer commissioners. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, 5-0. Peter, do you want to tee us up here?
Sure, thank you. So this is follow-up to the discussion last week regarding both the proposed rate increase and the proposed budget. So the rate ordinance that's before you this evening for first reading is proposed by staff to be a 5-year ordinance. And the reason for it being a 5-year ordinance is so that it indicates the funding that will be necessary for the early years of paying the debt that we will need to incur in order to build the water treatment plant. So the The first year, both for water and for sewer, is proposed to be a 2% increase, which is basically just carrying costs of the utility. And then for each of the 4 following years, we recommend 2% increases for sewer and 6% increases for water. You asked during the discussion last week for some additional information, three different types of additional information. One was to run a different alternative rate increase. And so we did that. I'll present that information in a moment. Another was you requested information that we have recommended. Let me say the calibration of the recommendation staff has made regarding the rates is based on a 2-part test where we believe that in addition to paying for the anticipated costs of operating the utility and paying the debt, that it's important to maintain at least a positive balance in the water part of this water and sewer utility fund. So even $1, but at least just into positive direction for water, not going into the red where it would be subsidized by the sewer operation. And then for the overall water and sewer together, we think the fund balance should be maintained at a minimum of $1 million. And so we used those 2 tests and ran cash flow analyses against those in order to determine how much of increased rates would be necessary in order to carry this through this 5-year period. And so you asked for some information about why the $1 million is the threshold that we recommend, about what kinds of, we advised you at that time that it's because there are major, there is major infrastructure within the utility system that can need to be repaired suddenly without notice and the opportunity for advanced planning. And when that happens, it's often either some very expensive pumping or filtration function, or pipes in the ground, which are expensive construction to do. And so either way, it tends to be more expensive than just say a roadway repair that might suddenly need to be done or something like that in other parts of town infrastructure. The utilities work is expensive. And so the Public Works Department provided for the backup for this meeting a memorandum that summarizes the kinds of things that can go wrong in the system and actually have gone wrong in the system over the last several years. We would be happy to go further into any further detail you'd like to go into related to that item. But that memorandum was responsive to that particular request. There was also a request for information about the impact to individual households, how the recommended amount of increase would affect consumers in Brattleboro households. And so Public Works again did an analysis and presented it in a memorandum that's part of the backup for tonight that showed the 3 different types of households and then how they'd be affected by the 2% magnitude increase and how they'd be affected by the 6% magnitude increase. So the range, the full report has information for each of those different permutations, but the range is from the 2% increase for a single person household, and these are actually real households in our system and real bills, but with the names and addresses withheld for privacy. The level of increase would be $10 for the year for that smaller household and the smaller amount of increase. And with a household of 5 people and a 6% increase, the level of increase would be about $34 for the year. So that gives you a feel for how the order of magnitude that would be felt by these increases for different types of Brattleboro households. And finally, you asked us to run a scenario where instead of the sewer side would still be 2s, but on the water side, instead of a 2 and 4 6s, you asked us to do 3, 4, 5. Actually, the 5 years worth would be 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 instead of 2, 6, 6, 6, 6. When we ran that through the same analysis that we had done with several other alternatives that we discussed last week, it didn't pass both tests. It passed the $1 million test, but it didn't pass the water component test, and actually ended up with the water falling in the worst case year in about $200,000 in the red. So we worked some alternatives off of that, working our way back towards the 2 and 6s to see if there was a sweet spot where there might be something other than the 2 and 6s that would still pass both tests. And we found that there was. At 35666, the water balance would stay just barely in the black at about $2,200 in the black and in the lowest year. And at 45666, it stays $150,000 in the black. But of course, either one of those requires a larger amount of increase in the first year, and the 45666 requires more overall increase over the 5-year period than what we had proposed. So we didn't think that you would be interested in that. We thought it was important to share the information, the outcome of the analysis with you. Of what we've analyzed, and if you agree with applying the $1 million test and the water positive test, then the 35666 would be an alternative to the 2666. So that's our staff report for this evening. I guess I should also note that for the benefit of the public, I think the select board's well aware of this, but last week we discussed the budget for next year first and then the rates. We're doing that in reverse this evening because if the select board is comfortable moving forward with this ordinance and knows what numbers you want included in it for the annual increases, if that is the 2 and 4 6s on the water side and the 2s on the sewer side, then the ordinance as it's before you tonight is ready to go forward for second reading, and the budget that's before you tonight is ready for adoption or to be put up with that ordinance for adoption next time. If you decide that you want to change the ordinance, we can do that. You can do that tonight so that it can be read and adopted on second reading in the same form as you indicate tonight as your preference. But that also will change the revenue side of the budget if the first year numbers are changed. So if the first year numbers aren't 2 2s, then it'll change the revenue for the FY21 budget. And so we would make the necessary adjustments in that and bring that budget back to you next time for approval. And that's why we're asking you tonight to talk about rates first and the budget second.
Thank you, Peter. It makes perfect sense, I think, to speak to rates again. But we did talk it out pretty good. I'm wondering if I should just kick it over to Daniel, because I think you were the one who requested to see some direct rate information. So how are you feeling? Do you want to make a comment on that? Or?
I did actually want to say something, but it wasn't about that. It was helpful to get the information on previous large unplanned expenses, and it was helpful to see how it would look on a household's bills. In the memo dated May 13th, on the bottom of page 3 and the top of page 4, there is an alternative rate proposal where it's 6s for water, but 1 for sewer, and that leads to a slightly lower than $1 million fund balance, but not so low that it's reckless. And I noticed that that's not really kind of highlighted in the most recent memo, but I was wondering if we would like to kick that around a little bit. I like the the kind of 3, 4, 5, 6 just seems like a bit all over the place. I like the it's this for this amount of time. So 6 and 1 seems okay to me.
Daniel, just for me and probably others, you said that was on a different backup materials, right?
So it's in the packet, but it's not the most recent memo. It's the one that we looked at last time.
And what were the number? Can you give me the numbers again? Because I was.
Yeah. So if you're looking at it, it's like page 24 of 40, and then it's the.
I meant the year number. Sorry, the increased numbers.
Got you. Let me just get it right in front of me.
May I?
So, yes, Peter, thank you.
If it's okay with you, I'd like to speak to it because I'd like to also speak to your comment about it being not recklessly below. Staff agrees. And so I'd like to just advise the select board that what Daniel has suggested is considering the the 2 and 4 6s for water, but 1s for sewer, correct, Daniel?
Yes, if that's how I understand the memo, right? So it says the one that included fiscal year 22 to 25 increases of 6% for water and 1% for sewer failed test number 2, but by a small margin, dropping the fund balance to 975.
Yes, and what I would say about that is I think there's enough play in this model. You know, when we do the modeling, we are doing reasonable estimates, but the reality is always going to turn out somewhat different. 975 is $25,000 from being $1 million. If the select board were comfortable with that, I think you've actually, you could approve that and feel like you've met the standard.
I like it.
I'll go ahead. I'll ask my question after. Ian, do you want to?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, Daniel. I feel a similar way. And I was the one who was kind of caught on the second part of the test. And I really appreciate the work that went into providing us with all of those unexpected expenses in the past. I found that very helpful, and now can see why it is pretty important that we keep a substantial amount of money in there. But yeah, I think if it's close enough and we can reduce it a little bit for the sewage, why not? And if the town feels like it's sufficient and meets it almost, why not pass that and have that instead?
Does anyone else have a comment? Liz or Brandy? I have a
I've
question.
been nodding. Just
I'm
because
nodding.
it
Okay.
sounds reasonable.
Mhm.
Well, I just, for clarification, I thought that the purpose of the 2s was to kind of maintain a basic level of increase required to keep the system running efficiently. So does this fall into the the anti-recommendation of keeping parity between those 2 accounts?
This variation flows out of the fact that the sewer fund is more solvent throughout this period than the water, because water is where the major expense is being borne. So those 2 roles were reversed when the town was looking at this same kind of a question 6 years ago. And there was a 5-year ordinance that was 2s for water and 6s for sewer because of all the work that was being done in the sewer system. Now we're into a period that's relatively more stable for sewer, and we're going to incur some significant costs for water, which is why that has reversed.
Okay. Personally, my reason I threw out the 3, 4, 5 was to sort of ramp up the, to ease any ratepayer into the idea of getting up to 6s eventually, and it would be a little less painful, I thought. But I'm not sure, given that this is a 5-year plan that I think is very likely to be looked at before 5 years goes by, especially with, just as background, anybody tuning in now needs to know that we are preparing for what could be an $11 million water plant upgrade. I'm not sure Peter mentioned that this time, but it actually should be top of the fold, so to speak, as far as like, why are we considering these large upgrades? I mean, large increases. And these 6s we have done before on the other side when we were upgrading our sewer treatment plant. So there's a little bit of history there. Anyway, I just wanted to say that I'm very confident that this board or a future board would be happy to revisit, because a lot of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, is under the assumption, a sort of conservative assumption that we may have to have a debt service of 3% per year on the bond. And currently we are crossing our fingers and hoping that we're going to have a 0% bond.
Right.
So
That's That's correct. So there's 3 different ways in which this could turn out better for the town than sort of the worst case scenario. So we anticipate that the price might come in, the overall cost of this project might come in as much as 25% under $11 million. Somewhere in between the $9 and $11 million is where we expect to land, because right now it is an engineer's estimate rather than a fully designed plant. We're moving into final design right now. So we could have some savings there. And then there's a possibility that through the very advantageous funding program that is administered by the state using federal money, that the state might grant to the town 25% of that final cost, whatever it may be. So let's hypothetically say it might be $10 million. Then there might be as much as $2.5 million then that would be a grant rather than a loan, and we'd only be borrowing 7.5. And then that money might be at below a 3% interest rate, perhaps as low as 0%. We've seen that at different times in this fund where the money's actually been interest-free. So there are several different ways in which this might turn out better. We thought it was important for projecting the cash flow of the system to be a little conservative. So what we did is we only took the benefit of one of those two 25%, discounted off of the 11 million by 25%, but not further, and then expected that the interest rate would be 3%, so as to come up with these numbers. And we totally agree that you and future select boards ought to look at these rates every single year, especially next year when we have good firm numbers for the water plant project. But even beyond that, in case things change going forward and you have an opportunity to reduce the out year, the amount of increase in the out years.
All right, thank you for that explanation and further background. I did see Ian's hand first, and then Liz had a hand up.
Liz, I've spoken after you.
I was just going to bring up all those caveats that Peter just explained, and I think that they could be very real, and we should be prepared to be nimble.
Ian?
Yeah, I'm just, and maybe this is my first newbie question of the night. Why are we planning out 5 fiscal years of rates if the plan is to have the select board next year look at it again and maybe every year? Why are we torturing ourselves on it when maybe we should just be setting it for 1 year and then say, we're gonna have a lot more information next year to look at this, and whoever is on the board will look at it then?
Probably Peter's fault.
Yeah, so we meant no torture.
Oh, I know. I mean, it's all in good jest.
A couple of things. So the intent is because we know this major expense is coming, right? We don't know exactly the details of it, but we know it's coming. And so we think it is prudent and proper for the board to see what the expected impact of that is and demonstrate that we're looking to protect the integrity of the fund in the manner that we've been having a conversation about in these different ways, running these different tests against it, and being able to demonstrate that our cash flow analysis out 5 years meets those standards. Having said that, we have demonstrated that there's a plan here that we know is subject to change. If it is uncertain enough to be uncomfortable enough for the board that you'd rather do a 1-year ordinance and adopt the 2s, and a year from now be looking at a longer term ordinance using the real numbers that we've come to at that time, that's a responsible way to move forward. It means that at the time that we'd be looking for town meeting approval to proceed with the project, there wouldn't be this sort of stable funding plan in place, right? But we would be doing, we could do the math on it and describe this process that you've gone through and show what 5 years going forward from there looks like. We would do that as part of presenting this to the community. So if your collective level of comfort is such that you'd rather do a 1-year ordinance and come back and do a longer term ordinance next year, that's perfectly fine.
And the benefit of that would be that we would come back next year and we would have the real numbers. So we could make a more effective plan on the rate changes based on those numbers, where now we're kind of just like making an educated guess on what it's going to be.
Right.
Is that, I'm asking if that's accurate.
Liz?
Yeah, we could do that, or we could vote on this now for the longer span, and then next year, if needs be, change it. But I think, you know, we're all about long-range planning, and this is part and parcel of long-range planning, would give everybody a level of confidence that we could go forward.
Agreed. So, so what does the board want to do? I'm feeling like I'm willing to, knowing that I'll be on the board next year and one of the main advocates for taking another look, at least, if not changing anything. I'm pretty confident that ratepayers can understand that we'll at least take a very good look at all of these numbers again. I'm willing to let go of my ramping up proposal and defer to Daniel's. But I guess the question is, do we want to adjust the number of years we're going out, or do we want to just go for it? Ian, how strongly do you feel about your 1 year?
I think Liz brings a really good point up, that it's probably just more responsible to show that we're looking out that far. I think it was just, I want to just have the conversation about why we're doing that. If we're just planning on, I guess, you know, sometimes it just doesn't sit well with me to make a plan without the information that we know we're going to have in the future. So I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit about it. But no, I think we should just defer to Daniel on it. I hate saying it. I hate saying it.
Yeah.
Daniel's over here on my screen.
I'm actually not.
I'm deferring to
Down
Daniel.
below me.
Everybody point to Daniel on their screen. That's where he is for
Oh,
me.
now he's moved. He's up here now.
Very good.
Yeah.
Steve has
Oh,
joined
because
us.
Janet came on.
Steve.
Steve has something to add.
Oh boy.
Really?
Yeah. Twos this year.
If I could just add,
Oh, Steve.
if I could just add, that's the reason that we came up with the model. The model, that tool, that rate tool was developed when we did the wastewater to look out to do advanced planning. So that's the advantage of going to 5 years. To let people understand these are the rates that we're going to be looking at. And that's what's the money is necessary for the project. Now, if it comes in less, then it will also help the project. The board will look at this budget every year as you do. We go through line item by line item. So I would recommend sticking to the 5 year. That's the reason that we actually spent money to build this model and paid people to come up with this. And it proved to be quite nice as we did the rates before with the wastewater. And the projections were real close. And as Peter said, they're conservative. So that's beneficial to everybody, because that may also help in times of need and to level the rates off in the future.
Thanks, Steve. I knew when you popped up, we were in trouble. Yeah, I gotta
Now
get on.
Daniel's back to being over
I
here.
didn't see your finger wag at all.
I get on and straighten these people out.
Yeah.
That seems to make perfect sense to me. So,
Can I make it clear, one thing that might have gotten lost in the exchange when Daniel brought up about the ones is the first year in that particular example still is 2 for both parts of the utility. And then after that, it's 4 6s for water and 4 1s for sewer. I just want to make sure that that part was clear, because that's how that one's structured. If you do rally around that, if that's what you want to approve this evening, you could then move forward also and approve the budget, because it has those twos, the 2 2s in the first year.
Oh, good.
Sounds good.
yeah, I'm feeling like this is the way we're leaning. I don't see anybody who's typed in to make a comment, although I'll talk this out a little bit so that someone can do that and raise their hand. But how's the rest of the board feel about moving forward with the, let's call it the Daniel amendment? And
Yes.
the Daniel counter proposal. And so that we can have some clarity going forward on this first reading.
Mhm.
Got one thumbs up, a lot of nods. Okay. All right, so I don't see anybody else who wants to comment on utility rate ordinance. So what do we do now? We have a motion.
There must be a motion.
Actually, the rate ordinance doesn't require action this evening. We just needed to know what you want us to bring you for the public hearing and the adoption on second reading next time. It's clear to me that you want the Daniel Quip option. So, you know, the board has something else you want to specifically direct, we'll bring the ordinance back to you in that form, which will be 2% in water, 2% in sewer for the first year. 6 is after that for water, 1 after that for sewer.
Yes.
Sounds good.
And having landed there, we would recommend that unless you have any further questions or the public has any further questions about the budget was a pretty straightforward discussion last time. It's pretty level. It's actually slightly down in revenues and less than 1% up in expenditures. So unless you want to take a deeper dive back into that, we would just recommend that you adopt the motion that's in the administrative report for your approval, your formal final approval of the FY21 utility fund budget.
That's what I'm, as everybody thinking that too. I think that's the best course of action. Peter, we don't have to do anything official wise to make the first reading official, or?
No, it's it doesn't require a vote. It just requires that you have discussion that you've had and take public input and be indicating what you want to adopt next time.
Great. I should have said that earlier, that it was the first reading, possibly. Still figuring this thing out. So if anybody has a motion for us. Traditionally, the chair does not make motions, just anyone watching is probably wondering what's going on. Liz.
There.
Yes. I move to approve the FY21 utility fund budget as presented or modified. Are we modifying it for Daniel now, or are we just approving
No,
it?
it's as presented.
Oh,
As presented. Thank you very much.
Not modifying the budget. Thanks, Liz. Liz has made a motion to approve the FY21 utility fund budget as presented. All those in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Thank you. That's 5-0. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to Steve for popping in and straightening us out a little bit.
Thanks, Steve.
We are moving on to unfinished business, and we're going to have our traditional COVID-19 update from Peter first off.
Thank you.
Do we need to adjourn as water and sewer commissioners?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, Daniel, you're the whole package. Yeah.
I did my homework today.
Commissioners, so that we're not doing other business steeped in water and sewer. That would be uncomfortable. All those in favor, say aye.
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 I'm laughing at Brandy's face. Sometimes the screens are good because you can actually see everybody's face at once, whereas when you're there in person, you're doing this to try to see people's faces. That was 5-0 to adjourn as water sewer commissioners. Now, Peter, please.
Thank you. So the COVID-19 report, I've got just 3 things to highlight tonight. Everything else is steady as we go, but there's 3 pieces of good news, actually. The police department is back to responding to every call in person unless the caller asks that they follow up not in person, because of the potential risk of spreading the virus. So for about a month or so, about 5 weeks, we had been following a protocol where it was only certain types of very urgent matters that resulted in a police officer actually going to the door. And there was a lot of interaction between the police and the community that was occurring either over the phone or by email or other means. So it's a good thing for all of us. It's a good thing for the department. It's certainly a good thing for the community that the police now are, we're at a place as part of the reopening where we feel like it's safe. They're following all the special protocols that are already in place, that already were in place. They're wearing masks, all the cleaning regimen and everything that's involved, and standing 6 feet apart or more. So all of that is still in place. But now if you need a police officer, they will come to you unless you ask that they don't. So we were glad to reach that threshold moment yesterday. Likewise, we were able to announce at the end of last week that the swimming pool at Memorial Park will open this year. As of right now, it's with very limited, there are some special restrictions for this particular summer that are very restrictive compared to the amount of use that often gets, particularly in hotter weather. So, but we also, we're feeling like it's a good thing to be able to open it all. We were concerned that there might not be a safe way to do that. But the advice from the public health professionals and the standards out through the recreation and parks community are such that municipal swimming pools are going to open. And basically there's a lot more to this, and I would suggest that people who want to learn the details of it and learn how they can access this and come and use the pool this summer, go and look on the town's website, either under the recreation and parks website or under a daily update, which contains half a page of details and some links for how to access certain forms that give more information about using the pool this summer. But in its barest essence, what's going to happen is there'll be schedules of certain windows of time where 25 people will pre-register. You'll sign up ahead of time so that you can come in at your appointed time and enjoy the pool. And then when that time is up, when that window's up and ththose folks leave, there'll be a 15-minute interval where the staff cleans everything. And then a new group of up to 25 people will be allowed in for the next interval. And that'll go on every day for all summer long, as far as we can tell at this time. If the situation becomes such that we can safely have more access or less regimented access, then we'll announce that to the community. And the third item just gelled this morning. So we've been discussing this for the last week or 10 days, and it looked like it was coming together, but I wasn't sure that it would, and that's why it wasn't any part of the backup for this. But going all the way back to a year ago, the Select Board supported the creation of the Work Today program by Youth Services, so as to provide some day labor opportunities for folks who are not employed in an ongoing manner and need employment and need the money. And so as to provide some public services through that program. So a nice kind of combination of providing opportunities for individuals who are struggling, and then also a benefit to the broader community. Because of the unique challenges we all face with COVID-19 and the increased importance of cleanliness in our public spaces, we've been working on a plan for how we can emphasize that in the work that the participants in the Work Today program will be doing, and collaborating with Emily Kornheiser, who in her role as an employee at Youth Services has been organizing this program and communicating with me and with the town around how to make it work. We believe that particularly in the maintenance of the porta potties, because we think it's important for the same public health reasons that we had last year, that we need to bring the porta potties out. We just haven't done it yet because we haven't been able to be sure that we could keep them adequately cleaned. And so what we have been talking about as town staff is if the Work Today program wasn't able to move forward, because we weren't sure until just very recently that it could, that we should add some additional employees who would be able to perform this function of maintaining the wiping down the porta potties several times a day, and also do some other cleanliness work in downtown. So wiping the buttons at the intersections for pedestrian signals, the parking meters, other things that are part of our public infrastructure downtown that get touched a lot throughout the day by lots of different people. We want to set up a program where we are keeping those things cleaner this summer when we all need that. And so what we think we have come upon kind of inadvertently as we were working on these two different things is a combination, because the other factor here is the Work Today program was intended to be 3 days a week. And of course, 3 days a week isn't going to be sufficient for maintaining the cleanliness of these areas that need attention throughout the day. We need that going on 7 days a week. So we think a combination of these two approaches, where this is a good focus for the Work Today program for this particular summer as we do the pilot project, but we will also, for the majority of the work that would be done related to these disinfecting cleanup efforts, would be done by seasonal town staff. And so our intent, unless the select board directs otherwise this evening, is to move forward with both pieces and to integrate them as best we can. We expect that we're going to be able to do that very completely. We'll set up a schedule where there's certain times when the Work Today slots are performing this function, and other times either overlapping or on separate days when it's town staff, all supervised by the same folks on the town staff so that we have continuity to this effort. And the funding, I believe, is an issue because it's not going to be an expensive investment in this these temporary employees who would do the part for the town. So while it's an unbudgeted expense, we think it will be readily absorbed. I can't give you a number this evening because we're not sure exactly how the two pieces of this are going to fit together and how many people we'll have and how many hours they'll work. So, but it won't be a large expense, and it'll be able to be easily absorbed in the overall general fund budget. And the funding for the Work Today pilot project has already been approved by the select board. So we're ready to move forward as soon as we can. We think that as soon as we can is going to be about a month from now. We'd like it to be quicker, but we don't think we can actually do all the things necessary to set it up properly and make sure that it's actually, keeping the promise of, cleanliness on a regular basis throughout the day, every day, until sometime early in July. So we'll be working right away on putting the details together. We'll keep you informed about how that evolves. If we can start sooner, we will. But our expectation is it'll be early July, and then it would continue on through the warm weather months and end sometime in October or possibly early November.
Great, Peter. Yeah, I mean, I think, sorry to just jump in, but I think it's a terrific use of the program and would also let a lot of people, feel a little better about those high touch surfaces that are going to be, transitioning into back to normal life makes a lot of people nervous. So knowing that some folks are going to be on it is a nice peace of mind for some. Not everybody is going to respond that way, I guess. But and I think the timing probably coincides with, it's probably going to take another month to feel, assuming that everything goes as well as it's going now, we hope. It's going to take another month to feel like people are going to be comfortable going downtown, I think, on a regular basis. Liz?
I just want to mention that I always elbow the crosswalk button.
You.
I saw someone this weekend use their toe, which was
Wow.
time.
I get my toddler to do it, so.
I actually have a serious crosswalk question.
Yep.
My understanding is that the buttons are not actually necessary for you to cross the road. Is
That's
that
true.
correct or
Whoa.
no?
The buttons?
So
I
like
think
if you were
it's the
standing at the
placebo
crosswalk
effect.
and you don't press the button and nobody else is there and nobody presses the button, it's still going to cycle through and eventually you'll...
Nope,
No?
you only get a
Ah.
warning if you press the button.
No, in
Okay.
fact, it's happened to me many times that I've gotten there, assumed someone across the street has already pressed the button, and you know what, they haven't, so we don't get the...
The nice thing about these ones is they have a little red light on when somebody
That's
presses
exactly
it,
right.
so you can eyeball it.
That's exactly right. You show up and the red light is
I've
lit,
never noticed.
you don't have to touch the button.
I know, but if you're in a conversation,
I'm interested in these kinds of things.
I'm learning so many things.
Oh, me too, Ian.
Peter, you were
if you hit it
saying.
with your knee, go easy on it because those things can break eventually. So,
That's true.
Jesus.
We've had our ups and downs with them, but
yeah.
I still get people saying, why do they say walk like a dog at all crossings? And so that's all I can hear now when I
I
hear
know,
it.
I don't remember what it originally says.
I think it says walk light
says
is on
walk lights are on at all crossings.
at
But
all
frankly, if
crossings.
you just think about it the other way, it's a little bit of whimsy even on a tough day.
Oh, shit. Shoot.
We're still in family hour here, Brandy. So
Sorry.
we'll lose our rating.
Yeah.
So does any other board members have a comment on that part of the
Porta
update?
potties. Porta
Yeah.
potties are going to be in the same places as last year.
Oh, good question.
That's our intent, yes.
And those
Yeah,
places
has there
are,
been?
And those places are in the Preston parking lot, at the High Grove parking lot, on the Grove Street side, and at the Brattleboro Common.
Thank you.
I'm curious, was there any feedback of like the next spot, like if after those ones where the next spot would be?
I didn't hear that. There was some discussion early in the summer about whether they were in the right locations, and as time went on, everybody kind of seemed to gel around, yeah, this seems to work, was our feedback. I don't know whether I missed something out there that maybe we need to pay attention to. I never actually heard people saying we ought to have a fourth and it ought to go here.
No.
Okay.
I think some people wish the one on Preston was handicap accessible, but I think we did a good job of explaining why it can't be, even though that's really unfortunate, but the way that it's placed up on a curb. I remember that coming up, but.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Peter. And do you have a second? You don't have a second item
Yeah,
under?
so that's the general update, and then we have a substantive issue to address regarding the parklets.
Right. I'm sorry. I thought you were going to flow right in. But,
Sorry, I can. Happy to. So the parklet plan is coming together. It also isn't quite final, but it's pretty close now. I want to thank Stephanie Bonin, who's been a good partner in this. So we've been working with each other sort of at the connecting point between what the town can do to make this successful and what the merchants need to do to be our partners in it. And so she's been working to gauge, which of the restaurants and in two cases, purveyors of alcohol that are, I'm stumbling because one of them is Hermit Thrush. So, I mean, I wouldn't call that a bar and I wouldn't call it a restaurant. But anyway, Hermit Thrush and Arkham are in this plan. And then there are others that are restaurants, full service restaurants. And so we've been working together to identify where they could safely be placed. What would be the maximum that would get placed if all the potentially participating businesses chose to be involved, and then working to determine, basically at the end of the day, we only want to put in a parklet where we only should put in a parklet where a particular business is going to operate its business in that parklet. The sort of shared coming and going doesn't work from a health and safety point of view, and it also doesn't work from an alcohol licensing point of view. So it's important that we only construct a parklet at a place where a restaurant wants it there and is going to take on the responsibility of operating it. And so as of right now, we have 7 that are confirmed. We had 6 as of the time of the backup last Friday. We have a 7th now that's signed on. There's a pretty good chance there'll probably be an 8th or a 9th. I don't think we're going to get all the way up to 12. I'm pretty confident we aren't. But there's still a few maybes that are just, things are being looked at both from a safety perspective and from a restaurant deciding whether or not they feel like they have the capacity to operate a parklet and have that additional tables and additional table service that would require. So what we're asking for this evening is that you authorize staff to go forward with the implementation of this plan, that you authorize the expenditure of up to $30,000 from the program income fund as an economic development investment to help keep these businesses alive through COVID. It may or may not be recoverable as a COVID-related expense. We don't think it will be, but as we pay attention to the ever-evolving rules around the state and federal funding for COVID, if there becomes an opportunity for the town to recover these monies, then we'll certainly seek that. But we're recommending that it come from program income rather than from the general fund, because we think as an economic development investment, it qualifies, and we shouldn't count on getting the money back. And then the $30,000 is calculated because the town will buy and install the Jersey barriers that will define the boundaries of each of these parklets. And we estimate that it's going to cost about that each one will be 2 parking spaces in size. And the number of barriers necessary to do that 12 times around the downtown at $2,500 per parklet would be $30,000. So I believe we're going to spend less in the end, but we're asking for the authority to spend up to $30,000 for this project. There might also be some related incidental expenses that we'd like to be able to, if we don't spend the $30,000 fully on the Jersey barriers, it would be helpful to be able to have, a little bit of money that we could spend on things that would help the DBA to, get installed and get these businesses occupying in them. And those would be small expenses. I don't know exactly what they would be at this moment, but we wouldn't fill the gap if we ended up doing $25,000 worth of barriers. We wouldn't be looking to spend $5,000 more on other things, but it would be helpful to be able to spend a little bit of incidental money if there's incidental money available. So with that understanding, we're hoping that you'll authorize the funding. We need you, if you're in favor of moving forward with this, to, in order for us to be able to move quickly and not have to come back to future select board meetings for action that it actually enables it to be successful, we would need for you to provide some additional authority to me and some additional authority to Hillary Francis, the town clerk. The additional authority you would provide to me, and we've provided, for those who are paying attention to the administrative report that was online, this came up over the last couple of days in discussions with town attorney Bob Fisher. So I have provided motion language to the board this afternoon that was not part of the backup for this meeting. But what those motions intend to accomplish is you authorizing me to implement this plan and to actually sign a document with each of the different participating restaurants where they obligate themselves to maintaining that space, and we permit them, the town permits them to occupy the parklet area that is otherwise public space. We allow them to have it as their private space just for this summer. We expect that these would be installed as soon as possible, perhaps within a week, perhaps a little longer, and then would stay there until, again, like with the prior conversation, at least into October and possibly into the early part of November. We would make a decision about them based on the weather conditions in the fall and making sure that they're all removed in time before we get the first major snowstorm of the season.
Which could happen in October.
Hillary, I'm sorry?
It could snow in October.
It could, so we'll pay attention to that and govern ourselves accordingly. I didn't mention, I'm sorry, the details for Hillary. So there's the funding, there's the authority for me to actually implement the program, and then we ask that you delegate your authority. The select board, of course, as liquor commissioners, has authority over liquor licenses and outdoor consumption permits in town. There is a special program the state has initiated that is more nimble than the usual processes to try to get businesses that are going to go outside into areas that they don't normally provide outside service, but where they normally provide alcohol along with the meals indoors, for them to be able to get a quick provisional permit to provide full service outdoors. At the outdoor tables, they'd be able to provide whatever they're licensed to do. So it might be just beer or wine, or it might be beer, wine, and mixed drinks. But whatever they're usually licensed to do inside, they'd be eligible to do outside, either in the cases of the restaurants that have their own parking lot. This might be in their own property, where there would also be a permitting requirement through the Planning Services Department of the town. Or for those that don't have their own private space to do this, it would be those that are participating in the parklet program. And in either case, whether it's on the private property or in the parklets, we'd like you to authorize that Hillary Francis is empowered by you on your behalf to issue the outdoor consumption permits that will be in line with what the state is issuing to these businesses.
Okay, great. Thank you, Peter. Who has questions, comments? I have a couple quick ones. Daniel and Brandon.
Insurance question. This was like public space, and now we're giving it over to private entities. Who is responsible for what happens in that space?
That's the purpose of the document. So we, up until yesterday, hadn't incorporated that piece, but we knew we needed to get Bob's blessing on how we were moving forward, and he called that out. He thought both from a just being legally proper about it, to have private entities occupying these public spaces and selling alcohol in them, which is prohibited by ordinance, that it was important that there be a legal approval from the town and an acceptance of responsibility by the restaurant. And so he's going to fashion up this simple agreement that we're going to use for each of them.
Okay, a quick follow-up on that. The responsibility for any kind of like trash or recycling cleanup in those spaces will fall on the businesses?
Absolutely.
And that's very much understood by them?
Yes. The reason why some of them are choosing not to participate is a combination of, proximity to their kitchens, number of wait staff that they normally have versus the number they think they need to have to be able to handle the outdoor space, and the obligation of the outdoor space. This comes free, and it comes very visible, and hopefully with some something that's going to be beneficial to the business in terms of the enjoyment of the customers. But it comes with responsibility as well. And so each potentially participating business needed to weigh those things and decide whether to be.
And then just like a question that I don't even think I really need to ask, but I just want to double check. Smoking is prohibited in these spaces, and that will be enforced by people responsible for these spaces?
That's a really good point. And the answer, I'm going to say yes, because we get to decide. And while smoking on the sidewalk is allowed, it is offensive to some. And more importantly, smoking in a restaurant is not allowed. And
right.
So since this will be an extension of the restaurant in the outdoor area, I think we should say no smoking.
Okay.
Me too.
Me three.
Brandy, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
I have a question that may have been answered 100 times by either the governor or us, but I can't remember. So are these parklets only available if you are an establishment that serves food, but also serves alcohol, or are they available if you're an establishment that maybe serves kind of token food, but is mostly a bar?
So they can be for either.
Okay.
They also can be for businesses that serve food and not alcohol.
Sure.
And they also can be for businesses that are not in the food business at all.
Ooh.
In our case, the way it has evolved, it looks as though all the participants are going to be food and beverage operators.
Okay.
But when I was first discussing this with Stephanie, and I believe when she was first discussing it with the business community, we weren't strictly limiting it just to restaurants and bars.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Daniel, thank you for the smoking question, because I hadn't even thought of that nuance.
Yeah, we hadn't either. Thank you.
My question is, when you were talking, you said that each parklet is going to take up 2 parking spaces. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I hadn't really absorbed that. For some reason, I was thinking 1 space per parklet. but that would be kind of small. Next question, though, is are they going to be together to any extent as far as they've been approved or not approved, but at least sort of fleshed out so far?
Yep.
I'm wondering how much parking we'll lose and how much pushback people will give us on that, because if there's a long stretch of parklets, that's a lot of parking.
We'll find out about the pushback. I don't know what to expect with that. Our assessment of the situation is in the balancing act, particularly this summer, the economic need, the need to have people spaced and not tight in indoor spaces, and the fact that, we've got the Harmony lot is going to be almost completely available. There'll be just a very small parklet over in the one corner for Arkham. The transportation center will be completely available, and there'll still be a lot of on-street parking. We feel like a problem. If we find out that we've given over too much of the street to parklets, we hear about it from people, then, that'll be one of the lessons learned from this that we'll have to think about. But for implementing this in the time of COVID, relatively on the fly, we think it's calibrated appropriately.
Okay, and just, of course, another question. Sorry, Liz, I'll just get done with mine. Of course, it's not going to be in any handicap spots, correct?
That's correct. We would not parklet in a handicap spot.
Thank you. And my last is a suggestion on, I'm feeling personally that it would be nice if we just limit it to calendar year 2020, because I don't want to kind of give anybody who does have a problem with this idea, the idea that we're not going to lift it at some point. I think we should revisit this for the next summertime season and not just have people assume that they're just going to be permanent structures. Obviously, they're going to go away in October or November, but I don't want to give any of the restaurants the idea that it's a done deal for the rest of time. What does everybody think about that?
I don't know, it might be cool. But then again, I'm not gonna, it could be cool.
Well,
Oh,
no,
no,
I think it's good to limit it to this 1 year and see how it goes.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's impossible that we won't want to continue it, but I think out of fairness to the different interests downtown, we might just want to limit it to the experiment, the definite experiment, and then see how people feel about it.
Sort of a bit like the 1 year ordinance versus the 5 year. And I mean, I would love to leave the door open, fully open for like a discussion next spring. I think like it'll take time for people to adjust, and habits take a while to change. And I don't know, I've always been excited about the idea of parklets, so it's nice that we get to have this little experiment, even though it's because of this terrible situation.
So just for clarity, does that keeping the door open, does that mean don't limit it to this year or do limit it to this year?
Well, I think we can say we'll revisit this in the spring, rather than this will end and we will have a conversation about it and, we'll revisit in the spring. We'll see how it goes.
Well, the reason I put it that way is because a potential motion we were kicking around is that for the creation of up to 12 parklets in downtown Brattleboro. I was just suggesting, for 2020. But,
May I offer a clarification? Because I think it may help you. We omitted a limitation on it that way, so it was a good catch that it's not explicit. But I don't believe any of the folks participating. I don't believe that any of the restaurants who are signing up. I don't believe that Stephanie, and certainly not staff. We didn't expect that if you approve this tonight that the parklets would be permanent. What we do anticipate, I think there's a fair amount of excitement around this, both from some people within town government and from people in the business community, that once we try this, maybe it'll need to be tweaked. Maybe it'll just, we'll get lucky and it'll go great the first way we try it. But I think there is a fair amount of at least optimism that it will go well enough that people will want to do it again. The select board will want to approve it again. But no, I don't believe anybody has any expectation that would just automatically happen without further review.
Imagine not.
So we could certainly make the document say 2020, and that'll be really clear.
Okay. Liz?
I just wanted to mention from a town planning perspective that parklets are all the rage, and that we've also heard from our own Brattleboro Planning Commission supporting this idea. They wrote us a letter identifying several economic development planning initiatives, and this is one of them. So it's just nice to know that we have their support in principle.
Indeed. Ian, and then I might go to a member of the public, but then Daniel's raising his hand too. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, this just seems like a great thing. I don't know. I think it might be clunky. We may need to change it around a little bit. We may not be able to refund the 30K, but we're making strong, definitive action during a pandemic to support local businesses. And it's also might make downtown even cooler than it already is. And, you know, I ran on trying to make Brattleboro a place young people want to be. And I am so excited about this, and walking downtown and drinking a beer on a parklet. I'm super excited. So that's all I have to say.
Older people might like it too.
I was not excluding older people.
I wanted to just kind of make sure that we're going to do all that we can, and the DBA is going to partner fully in this to make these Jersey barriers look a little prettier than a Jersey barrier would usually look.
Yeah, so
right?
That actually overlaps with the kind of otherwise mysterious comment I made about incidental expenses. You know, we might get into some contracting that we need some help with. We don't expect that. We think we're going to be able to do all of the heavy lifting ourselves. But beyond that, the DBA is working on a couple of different ways in which these might be beautified, and might need some help with that. And it won't be expensive, but you know, being able to spend a little bit of that leftover money, if there is leftover money, to help them implement that part of this, we think would be part of making it successful. So we insisted on concrete Jersey barriers so that these would be safe. There was a fair amount of difference of opinion about different styles of parklets. But the counterbalance to that is we said, look, we're going to buy these things, and we don't know whether they're going to be used again for parklets. Maybe they're going to be used for construction jobs in the future, but you can make them pretty. If you want to paint them all kinds of bright colors, you can do that. And there's been also some discussion about how this might interact with the flower program. And so on all those levels, as we refine the details, we'll try to help the DBA make these pretty.
Just want to be really clear. These Jersey barriers will be the property of the town of Brattleboro.
Yes.
So beautifying
the property of the town of Brattleboro.
So beautifying cannot have like the name of a business on them.
That's correct. This is not advertising. This is beautifying. Right. Good point. Yes. Right.
Yeah. I just, and like
go ahead.
No.
I was going to get too deep in the weeds. I was going to tell you that. What's that?
I love the weeds. Go.
Okay. I was just going to say that, if it turned out that some of these don't get used for parklets again in the future, we might throw a coat of Battleship Gray on them or something in order to trot them out to a construction site. But so what, right? So initially the idea is, we put out something there that we know is durable enough to protect people, and let artists and others enjoy themselves and express themselves. But it needs to be just about beauty and whimsy and not about advertising.
I happen to know that Daniel is a fan of chalk, so you could always use chalk on that surface.
Yeah.
That was a reference to your social media page. Sorry.
There was really good use of chalk at Sunday's presentation.
And I'm a fan of my toddler son out front here. Ian, I'd love to go to Wendy has a question.
No, I actually wasn't raising my hand. Sorry.
Oh.
I was just sort of, yeah.
Wendy, do you want to appear on screen or do you want to just chime in with audio? Are you still awake?
Yeah, here I am. Yeah,
there-
oh wait, I can do the camera myself. Here I am. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Hey,
Okay.
Hey.
welcome.
So, I have two questions and they're separate about the parklets. The first, which was I think kind of answered as the conversation progressed, is what is a parklet? So I want to make sure that I understand this. So it's going to be an area that a business will use that's outdoors near the business. It'll probably be public space unless they have their own, like it's their own parking lot, like or something like maybe like what Whetstone Station has. And it'll be there'll be some sort of deck on it, like a different surface, and then it'll be protected and it'll be for outdoor use of that business and their patrons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe something like this.
Oh, okay. And it's something that won't get taken down like at night or on days when
No, it's going to stay there all summer long.
Okay.
There's only one thing, Wendy, you nailed it. I would say one thing differently than that, which is when you spread this all the way to a place like Whetstone or any other restaurant that has its own private property. We did mention that in the conversation, but those won't get parklets. Those will be doing their own sort of cordoning off of areas in their parking lot with the approval of the planning services department. So that's safe as well, but that's safe in their own private space to set up some outdoor tables. What the parklets are explicitly going to be on public property. They're going to be all but two of them in the street, picking up on-street parking spaces, and one will be in the High Grove lot and one will be in the Harmony lot. Otherwise, what you described is exactly right. And one detail that I didn't speak to, and you kind of did, but I think is worth just being a little more explicit about is the platform that'll be constructed within the parklet is an important part of this, both for safety and accessibility. And it is an understanding between us and the business community that the town will provide the perimeter with the Jersey barriers and otherwise, do all of the assisting and facilitating that we've been talking about. But the individual restaurant, one of the responsibilities of each individual business that sort of adopts one of these and signs on for the responsibility of it will be to put in a proper deck. That can be very simple, some framing and some plywood, but it needs to provide a flat, safe surface that's at the same level as the sidewalk.
Oh, great. So that will make it so that folks who use wheelchairs, walkers, canes will have equal access to everybody else. Okay, that's great. So thank you for explaining. My second question is about the hours of operation of the parklets, because on one hand, well, actually on the one hand that I'm about to speak is the bigger hand. The other one is the smaller hand. So in the bigger hand, I'm really excited for this. I've lived in places that since I moved, well, Jersey City specifically had turned one of its busier streets in the downtown area near Grove Street, it's called Newark Avenue, into no cars at all. And it's made that area, since I've gone back to visit, so much nicer just to be in and walk around. And I know we can't close Main Street because it's a state highway, but promoting more outdoors and walkability and reasons to be out and not just be in cars, I think is wonderful. But the noise complaint, that's where the small hand is coming from. I know it's a really weird analogy to use, but my concern is about noise complaints, because especially with alcohol establishments and because those are in mixed use neighborhoods, where people live, what's what are the orders or ordinances or regulations, et cetera, going to be around that?
We hadn't anticipated imposing anything that is particular to the parklet, but rather that whatever the business's normal operating hours are would be allowed out in the parklet. I would suggest that given the degree of uncertainty that we have about all the various details of this and how we're working our way through it very quickly to just get the stuff in place and give it a try, that we start there. And if that becomes a problem, then we can work together. The town possesses the authority to modify the liquor licenses, and also because it's our parklets to determine some behavioral boundaries in addition to the physical boundaries of it. So I would say, we all want it to succeed. The restaurants don't want to alienate the neighbors. But if we bump into some issues where that does emerge as a problem, I think we could just address it together as a community.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
Hi, Wendy.
Actually, when you said noise, I thought you were going to say something about motorcycles and logging
Oh,
trucks.
God.
That'll
That's
be
a whole
motor-
other, that's a whole nother conversation.
Exactly. There's someone else who wanted to ask a question concerning decorating the barriers, and that was Felicity. If you are up.
Yep, I turned my microphone on. Liz, thanks for mentioning our Planning Commission letter. Glad you read it. And we've been, at least in another couple of groups I've been in, talking about public service announcements vis-a-vis safe behavior. I'm just wondering if you guys would consider using the barriers as artistic opportunities to inform the public about safe behaviors, demonstrating what 6 feet is, sort of things like that, or no, just pretty pictures on the barriers.
I don't have strong feelings either way, I guess. Who does?
Don't smoke.
I mean,
Things being
I think-
pretty and inspiring
Mhm.
are very important. And, like there's that lovely mural that sort of just recently got finished on Elliott Street, right? And those things lift your spirits, and boy, do we need some lifting of spirits right now.
And I think probably each business that knows they're getting one, I would imagine, has been having their excited wheels spinning about what they want represented outside of their business. And I'm excited to see those ideas.
Liz?
I have a question for Peter. And your negotiations with Stephanie on the beautification, are individual artists being contacted, or does each restaurant and business have free reign to do it themselves or contact artists or whatever?
I don't know. I believe they plan some kind of a coordinated partnership between the DBA and the community of artists in some fashion, but exactly how they'll tie into that community, how the artists will be identified is something I don't know. My understanding with Stephanie has been that the town would allow them to be decorated, and the DBA and the businesses would make arrangements with artists.
So that Felicity could give her a suggestion to Stephanie.
Certainly, yeah. And I know that Amanda Whitman, who works with Stephanie, is Stephanie wasn't able to be on the meeting tonight, but Amanda is, so she's hearing all of this and can certainly take that idea back to Stephanie and to the businesses.
Great. Thanks, Felicity. So we have a little bit of business to do if we want to move forward with the parklets. And should we start with the more boring legal motions there, or should we group everything together?
Ooh, I'll do the boring legal ones.
No offense.
Yeah.
When you're ready for the Hillary Francis boring legal motion, I have one change I need to ask you to make, which I'll explain at the appropriate time.
Do my fellow board members have that in front of them?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent.
Shall I go ahead?
Please.
Oh, yeah, please.
Okay, so the wording of the motion includes the word provisional. It says to authorize the town clerk to approve provisional outdoor consumption permits. I had a misunderstanding that Hillary corrected for me late this afternoon. The provisional permits are the ones that are being issued by the state just for this very short window of time to keep people, get them into business outdoors as quickly as possible. The follow-along permit will be a regular outdoor consumption permit issued both by the town and by the state. And so when you adopt this motion this evening, you should just drop the word provisional from it, please. Thank you.
Great. So would anybody like to make the, should we
Wait,
do that motion now?
Yeah, I move to authorize the town clerk to approve outdoor consumption permits in conjunction with the outdoor restaurant use during COVID-19.
cool.
Excellent, thank you. Ian has moved to authorize the town clerk to approve outdoor consumption permits in conjunction with outdoor restaurant uses during COVID-19. All those in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0, thank you. There is another motion.
Is it the
Aye.
parklet motion?
There's a couple.
Yes,
Okay.
well, there's the authorizing the town manager to assign parklets.
I'll do that one.
Why do I have this?
It's in your email.
Oh, thank you. I'm like, look, all I see is one motion here, and I'm
It
getting
came late
confused.
today. Okay, so I move to authorize the town manager to assign particular parklets to particular businesses and to take any other actions necessary to implement the parklet program.
Thank you. Daniel has made a motion to authorize our town manager to assign particular parklets to particular businesses and to take any other actions necessary to implement the program. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And that also passes 5-0, Jan. And there is one last very important motion to make. And have I been bullied out of my 2020 addition to this one? Or that's fine.
Yeah, bullied.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's the correct
Ian is
term.
nodding. That's what I was looking for.
A
Jesus.
democratic process
Perfectly
has allowed us to get to the point where we don't need to put that in there.
Bullied.
Absolutely. Who wants to
Okay,
make that motion?
I lost it. What's happening to
Liz.
me?
Oh, no, sorry. Liz is raising her hand, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I move to authorize the expenditure of an amount not to exceed $30,000 for the creation of up to 12 parklets in downtown Brattleboro.
Thank you, Liz. Liz has made a motion to authorize the expenditure of an amount not to exceed $30,000 from program income.
Yes.
For the creation of up to 12 parklets in downtown Brattleboro. All those in favor, say aye.
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 And that's 5-0.
Thank you.
I'm saying a lot. It's driving me crazy. I hope you're not driven as crazy as I am by it. Here I go again. So it's approaching 8 p.m. and I think maybe a break might be in order. Who agrees? Good, lots of nods.
Aye.
Would everyone be comfortable coming back fairly quickly at 8 p.m.?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll take a break until 8 p.m. or 8:01, something like that. So I'll call the Select Board meeting of June 2nd, 2020 back to order, if you don't mind. Do we have everybody? Yes. Everybody's in different windows. Perfect. Confusing. Next up on our agenda, we're still in unfinished business, but we're making some pretty good time, I think. I shouldn't have said that. So we have a FY20 general fund budget that Peter's going to tell us about.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, so the news here is really good. We've lost Ian's picture on our screen. Hopefully we haven't lost Ian.
Yeah. Okay. Ian, you still with us? Oh, there you are.
Okay. The news is really good about the current year's budget. So, we've done projections for each meeting over the last couple of months out of concern that the COVID situation might cause revenues not to come in as normal, might cause us to incur some extraordinary expenses. The early estimate was very cautious about that, particularly on the revenue side, but we have had far better than expected performance of the property taxes, rooms and meals, local option tax, and sales local option tax. And so I can go into the details if you'd like, but given the length of the agenda and the fact that this report doesn't need action tonight and it exists online, people can see it, it might be best just to summarize by saying, until about a month ago, or less than a month ago, we were cautious. We didn't think we would have a deficit, but we didn't think we'd have much of a surplus. And we thought that, it could go a little bit either way. Because of all three revenue sources coming in far better than expected during the fourth quarter of this fiscal year, or during the May period, I should say, because it was actually fourth quarter property tax collections, but third quarter deferred sales tax and rooms and meals tax collections. So there's one more quarter to come. But based on the performance of those three sources of revenue and everything else being about as we expected, we now expect that the outcome for the year will be potentially as much as $500,000 to the good. We were currently estimating $480,000. Now there will be some additional expense going against that isn't necessarily in the forecast, but the revenues are still being forecast on a relatively conservative manner. We're not being overly optimistic either. So I think we're in a pretty safe space where we certainly are going to come in with a favorable experience, and it looks like it might be as much as $400,000 or $500,000 to the good. There's a nuance to this I just want to be careful about for the record, which is when we say to the good compared to the budget always presumes a certain amount of use of fund balance, which we roll over and have made a good practice of in recent years of rolling that from the general fund balance out into the capital fund to help us accomplish more capital work than we would otherwise be able to afford. And this year, that number was $337,000. So if we had a break-even outcome, we would use $337,000 of the fund balance. The way we currently forecast how we think the year will end is that compared to budget will be $400,000 to $500,000 to the good. What it means is we'll have a small surplus and not have to use any of that fund balance. We'll actually roll some new money into the fund balance. So a really good outcome for us, especially in COVID. One of the reasons why, but not the only reason why, but it was a huge, unexpected, pleasant surprise, was the under statutes for how property taxes are collected for both municipal operations and schools. The town is obligated, the municipal government is obligated to collect all of the taxes and then to pay 100% of what is owed to the schools. So in a year where anything gets adjusted related to the state education taxes, and there's usually some adjustment, usually it is smaller than it was this year, but whenever that kind of adjustment occurs, or whenever we see a decline in the rate of payment of property taxes, the town is obligated to keep the school system whole, and then any benefit or cost of that, any under collection or over collection of that particular revenue accrues to the town. And so there have been years when we incurred a little bit of a loss, if you will, a little bit of an under collection in order to honor our obligation to the school system. There's been some years when we had a little bit of a benefit from that relationship and that structure under state law. This year, the adjustment for the fourth quarter was $234,000 to the benefit of the town. The amount of money that we were expecting to pay to the schools was reduced because of the state. And I can't explain exactly what caused this, but it's a factor that's caused by the state's funding formula for education statewide. And it happened that this year, the figure that we got, basically like a household getting an invoice, our fourth quarter invoice to make our payment for the education portion was $234,000 reduced from what it had been in the earlier quarters of the year. And so that accrues to our benefit, and it's a big reason why we are so confident that we're going to end the year in a really good, strong financial position.
Good news.
Yeah, amazing. Especially this year.
Yeah.
Discussion.
Newbie question.
Did you
And
get
this is
those?
sort of like in advance. I think I still get to use this a little bit. In advance, really, of like the parking fund discussion.
Yes.
Is there any way that like the general fund can transfer some money to the parking fund to pay for some of that capital work?
Yes, as a matter of fact. Thank you. Daniel and I have not discussed this matter, but when we got to parking, I was actually just going to mention that if you feel inclined to do that, that is something that would be within your authority. There's enough that we would still end the year to the good against the budget, and you could transfer some funds within the discretion of the 5 of you to the parking fund, which is your responsibility. That's one that the parking fund budget is one that is within your authority. You could do that in order to be able to proceed with some of that capital work that we otherwise won't be able to afford. Absolutely.
That's my only question.
You would need to do that before June 30th. After June 30th, that money will fall into fund balance and it'll become part of a future year's budget discussion.
Okay.
I would like to do that if we can.
Yeah, if you indicate tonight as a group that you'd like to do that, we'll bring you an item for June 16th that would make that easy for you.
Great.
I'd like to give that indication.
Yeah. Would you be looking for details of exactly what we're talking about? Because
I think we
there's
should
a couple
either
of
talk
items.
about that now or maybe more appropriately under the parking.
Yeah.
And then we can prepare an item for you for next time.
Makes sense. Now, part of this being having this good news is about people paying their taxes, right?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry I left that out. So we mentioned back when we were only at about 97% collected weeks ago that was not abnormal, that there's a lot of money that still comes in after the deadline for people who, for whatever reason, are able to pay but don't quite pay on time. And so the money that comes in at the end of May and into June usually brings us up to the figure we expect to get to for the year. Sometimes it's later in the summer when people get tax sale notices that's sort of a motivating factor for folks who needed a little more time, but realize now they're facing a deadline. They want to stay out of the tax sale. So in any event, it can vary a little bit from year to year, but we usually do get to that eventually through delinquent tax collections to 100% collection. But in the fiscal year before these books close at the end of the summer, we expect to get to 98.75. We already are at 98% as of tonight. As of the additional monies that we received another couple of $100,000, $300,000 of payments since May 19th. And on May 19th, we were a little over $400,000 shy of that 98.75 marker that is sort of the expected collections for the real-time fiscal year. So we're getting very close to that now. We've only got about $100,000 to go, and based on past rates of payment, we would expect to hit that mark for the fiscal year. Another indication that people have found a way to pay taxes is the applications for abatement. This is not to say necessarily that there won't be more that come in later in the summer. That's another item that often the publication of the properties that are subject to tax sale will sometimes trigger a few more applications for abatement. But as of right now, we only have 3. And the reasons cited for those 3, only one of those is inability to pay. There's one that is believes there's been a mistake made in the assessment process that they're asking for correction, and one that is related to an uninhabitable structure. So it's a really normal looking year for tax abatements as well so far.
And thank you, Peter. You saw that I sort of fished for that extra comment because it kind of blows me away that in this very difficult year, I mean, it's been difficult on our family, and I know it's been even more difficult on many families with jobs disappearing and unemployment benefits being uneven, I'll just say, that people are prioritizing or at least valuing paying their taxes. And I just want to thank everybody for doing that. And I hope it means that there's a confidence in how the town is run and the value of the services that the town provides. So I just want to call that out and say thank you for everybody who pays taxes, and that includes renters and landlords doing the right thing. So thank you. Anybody else want to comment on the general fund budget for FY20? Okay. Well, we don't need to take any action on this. I didn't get anybody on chat wanting to chime in, and just want to check if I have any phone people, and I don't believe I do. So do we want to move on, everyone? Or okay, lots of nods. Our next item coming up is the fiscal year 21 general fund budget, which is not an ordinary year for this.
No, it's a very extraordinary moment.
Yeah.
So in a normal year, the select board would receive a proposed budget from staff about the 1st of November, spend 3 intense months working through November, December, and January to come to the place where you're comfortable with what you're ready to recommend to representative town meeting. That budget, the recommended, select board's recommended budget goes into the town report. Town meeting addresses that as part of the warning for town meeting in mid-March. We then have a budget approved by town meeting of one form or another, and are ready well in advance of July 1st to go into the new fiscal year. This year, of course, all those other things happened right up to the select board recommending a budget and it going into the town report. But you know, when we almost had a town meeting, and we'll be talking later this evening about alternatives to try to still do that under these difficult circumstances. You know, got up to having the information meeting 10 days before the town meeting, trying to squeeze in, you know, this business before the COVID restrictions became too strict to be able to have 180 people in a room. And we didn't quite make it by a few days. And so the March 21st representative town meeting was canceled. We don't yet have an adopted budget. As time went on and it became really clear that, you know, some of our early optimism that maybe the COVID curve would be a quicker experience, and you know, perhaps in June we could have a representative town meeting to adopt the budget and do the other business of representative town meeting. That early optimism faded quickly. We came to realize that we would need some special permission, and State Representative Emily Kornheiser and State Senator Jeanette White and the others locally, as well as, you know, good strong support across the state. I think it ended up being unanimous in the Senate and the House. I know it was at least unanimous committees of government operations. So there was a really good recognition that in Brattleboro and in a handful of other communities that had not yet held an annual meeting, we needed another way to move forward and have a budget before July 1st so that we could continue to provide government services. And so the action of the legislature has made it possible in this 1 year, due to the COVID emergency, for the select board to adopt the budget. You do have a representative town meeting. You will publish a warning for that representative town meeting once we have figured out how to move forward towards that. And you know, you could place a ratification question before town meeting to follow something that is, you know, sort of consistent with the normal processes, but you're not obligated to do that. You are empowered by the state this year to adopt the budget, and we need you to do that. We need you to exercise that authority, at least in this first instance, so that on July 1st we can keep providing government services. And so the question for you tonight, staff is recommending to you that the budget that is before you, and we put it so that you and the public would have ready access to the entire document. So it is everything that appeared in the town report related to the budget. It's the budget message that describes the major major aspects of the budget. It's the entire line item budget. It's the summary document, and it's the pie charts that we were asked to prepare for this year to give a little bit more accessible visible impact of the different aspects of the budget. All of that is in your backup for tonight. And if you, having had a chance to take another look at that, feel as though you're ready to move forward and adopt the budget that you recommended to representative town meeting, you just need to tell us that. We think it's appropriate that you do that. You vetted this very thoroughly and you had a lot of public input back in the winter. If, on the other hand, you have any level of concern in this review that has caused you to think that any of this needs to be looked at some more, then we need to know that tonight, because I believe then you should schedule a special meeting during June for that purpose, to make sure that you can do that additional vetting and then still adopt a budget by the end of the month. But if you're ready to move forward to adoption, then we will bring the budget back to you with a motion for adoption on June 16th.
Thank you for that summary. It was excellent. Can't think of anything you left out there. My feeling, if no one else wants to jump in, is that we sure did go over this pretty well. The one exception, of course, is Ian. Does not have to feel like this is his budget. Oh, you go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, I'll let you finish, please.
Oh, I was just going to say it's a very unique circumstance, whereas we all feel like, wow, we know the ins and outs of everything, and you're playing catch up basically. So I don't know. I was just going to make a joke about if you vote against it, go ahead. Or whatever.
Go ahead.
You get a free pass.
I dare you.
There's only one of you.
Yeah, that's true. I was actually going to say, I have been thinking a lot about it, and I was thinking about maybe abstaining because I was not part of the rigorous 3 months that Peter was describing. And while I did my due diligence in preparing and reviewing it really very thoroughly for tonight and for next week, yeah, I think I would inform the board and the public who's watching that I intend to abstain unless someone gives me a really good reason why I shouldn't, because it's not mine, and I recognize that and the unique situation that COVID-19 put us in.
Oh, hands. Liz.
Well, I would just suggest to Ian that he's a select board member and he's reviewed it and he can have his opinions and judgments and he can vote. He doesn't have to abstain. He can certainly choose to, but you're a voting member of this board and you have the full authority to vote on the budget as you see fit.
Brandy?
Yep. I had something different to say, but since this is fresh, I will say Liz is absolutely right. And I probably would have, I also get where you're coming from. I would probably abstain too, but Liz is absolutely correct that if you feel like you dove into that sucker and when the vote comes up, you feel confident, you shouldn't in any way think that you don't have that right to vote as you want to, which includes abstention. I want to say that this makes me so uncomfortable. This is not the way that our town is meant to do business. I have thought long and hard about it, and I think it's what we need to do this year. But it makes me feel kind of sick to adopt a budget that hasn't hit the representative floor. I have to be honest. It hasn't sat well with me. I also think there's enough inconsistency just in life right now where we don't need to be halting the services that the town provides. We need consistency. We need things to run smoothly. And as you said, Peter, we can offer a ratification option when we can finally meet. And so I'm going to vote in favor of this, but it definitely on a moral level doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, it certainly is a disruption, not only a technical disruption, but sort of the spiritual disruption, if you will, of how we run things here. Daniel?
I'm in favor of adopting the budget that we spent all those months, reviewing and working on. I guess I have a question about like, what does town meeting look like after this, right? So like the budget is only ever one article in the warning anyway, right? And like in some ways, you spend more time talking about the other articles than you do about the budget. So town meeting will still have the authority to vote. Well, I guess we haven't decided on the warning, but were the warning exactly as it is right now, they would still be voting on all those things that are in there. And then the question would be ratifying this adopted budget as opposed to like approving it. Something like that. Is that accurate?
I believe you described that well. At the appropriate time, we need to go through the warning for town meeting that you previously issued carefully, because there will be some changes in addition to just the daytime and place change, obviously up front, that needs to be changed. There'll be also some substantive changes to it based on just the passage of time. So one example, for instance, is town meeting ratifies the select board's appointment of a town treasurer. And at the time that we issued the warning, you had appointed at that point an interim town treasurer, Debbie DeRosiers. We now have Andre Yeager, so as the town's finance director and treasurer because of the passage of time. So it'll be appropriate to change that article so that we're asking town meeting, you are asking town meeting to ratify the appointment of Andre as the town treasurer. There'll be a few other things like that. We'll go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and you'll, in the end, decide what is the final warning to publish for the meeting.
Great. Thank you. Here, Liz?
There's one thing that I wanted to bring up about, I'm fully in favor of authorizing this budget. But there's one thing that I think we will miss in terms of town meeting. And, since our world has upside down from COVID, I'm concerned about the human resource budget. And, the representative town meeting committee for human resources reviews the charitable giving of our budget. And there's a benchmark that it's 1%. But I would think it would be a good idea for us to ask Lauren Crisp, the town moderator, to ask the Human Resource Committee to check in with those agencies to see if how they're doing under COVID and have their responsibilities changed dramatically. And does there need to be some sort of a minor adjustments to those calculations? And, I know that the Human Resource Committee does a tremendous amount of work. And this year they had this great matrix model that they used. But if they could be asked to revisit that, if only just to report at town meeting that the assumptions that were made pre-COVID remain valid post-COVID, I think that would be the responsible thing to do.
So a suggestion to representative town meeting committee, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. Let me bring in Wendy from the Commons, who has a question or a comment, perhaps. Are you with us? Are you on the line?
I am with you, but I'm not with the
Wendy.
Commons.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Tim, you got to read the news.
No,
Anyway,
that was a brain,
that's okay. I'm not opposed to being affiliated with the newspaper. Anyway, I'm speaking as a voter and as a resident and also as a town meeting rep from my district. So I have a couple comments. I appreciate Ian's cautious stance, and also the response to it, to him. I also appreciate Brandy's expression of hesitation and discomfort with the way that, this is kind of all turned out. As a town meeting rep, that's something that's really important to me, is this process for approving the budget. And I get why it's happening now. And I also understand that without a budget, it would be really disruptive to, to running the town in the coming fiscal year. So I would caution that we never use this as a precedent, except for the most extraordinary circumstances, such as we're having now. And I think, to go back a couple months ago, well, I don't know what day it is. It's probably more than a couple months ago. The vote on whether Brattleboro should have a mayor, in my opinion, affirmed that voters in this town want to keep the form of government that we have. And so, again, just let's not use this as a precedent. And, from where I'm sitting now, I support kind of the consolation prize that you all have to do this. And I understand why the legislature approved it. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Wendy.
Thank you.
Well put, and I'm sure well heard. Peter.
Yeah, just to the degree that it might provide some reassurance to Wendy and others, I think that we probably all hold that opinion of the importance of, recognizing that this is a deviation in our form of government only because of the circumstances. And so the reassurance I provide, regardless of whether that comment was accurate or not about how we all feel about it, it is in fact the law that it can only happen this one time. The act of the legislature was very specific to this COVID emergency, and it cannot ever happen again unless there is some other extreme circumstance that is dealt with on its own merits at that time. Otherwise, this happens one time, and forever after we go back to normal processes and representative town meeting.
Good.
Well said. And I'll remind representatives out there that usually select board members start out as representatives, and often they go back to being representatives. So the last thing I would want to do is give more power to a select board that someday I'll be on the other side at representative town meeting trying to hold them to task. So that's my attitude too. So I think we don't really have an action unless anyone has any final comments, or if we have a caller. What was that, Peter?
Oscar Heller has asked to be recognized.
Oh, he must have just done that. I missed it. Oscar, yeah, chime in if you can, or if
I'm trying to turn it on.
Perfect. We hear you.
Okay. Hello. So I have a comment and a question. My comment is regarding the idea of looking at the human services budget again, stuff like that. I feel like this all gets a lot weirder if anything happens besides passing the budget exactly as it sort of went around in the last couple of months. Obviously, I think the intention is good and I agree with it, but I think the sort of democratic town meeting concerns get weirder if it's not the exact same budget. That's just my thought. And then my question is, if the board wants to leave as much power in the hands of RTM as possible, this is probably a question for Peter, or what options does it have to approve the budget in a way that makes it clear that it's temporary and conditional on eventual approval? Is there any mechanism for that, or once the budget passes, does any meeting vote on it just become a formality because it's happening anyway, et cetera?
Oh yeah, sorry, Peter.
So this is my advice rather than a requirement of law. My advice would be that the board adopt the budget and not attach to it any conditions. And the reason why is there has been so much that has happened this year that we would have said that'll never happen. And then it did. And so, you know, we are all very committed to having a representative town meeting. We're going to have a conversation here shortly about how to make that possible. But I don't know how that's going to unfold. I don't know when and how we're going to be able to hold a representative town meeting. And so I think making the adoption of the budget contingent upon an expectation that it'll flow a certain way with representative town meeting is very risky. And we don't want to have to go back to the legislature to ask for more special permission. So I think that what the board should do is adopt the budget straight out. And then at the board's discretion, but I think the board is probably inclined to do it, and staff would certainly recommend it as the right thing to do. When the representative town meeting is able to be warned, you know, warn it in a way that gives representative town meeting an opportunity to address the budget. It's a statutory matter that the representative town meeting has the authority to make the decision about the human services allocations. So that isn't going to be the funding to support the recommendation that the committee has made is going to be in this budget, but the actual dispersing of the funds will have to happen after representative town meeting has authorized that the funds be dispersed. So that's kind of a nuance to this that is a particular part of the budget. But in terms of the overall budget, you know, the warning of town meeting, when we are able to warn a town meeting, would be where the board would say whatever it chooses to say about the question that is being posed, whether it's, you know, straight up ratification or something that offers an opportunity for more review or potential modification. And that we would want further advice from Bob Fisher about that at the time of preparing the warning.
Thanks, Peter. Brandy?
So during the ratification process, isn't there the ability, or is there not, for full discussion, modification, very similar? Like when you come to us and you ask us to ratify your actions,
right,
we can tell you no, right?
Right.
Technically, yep. Or we can say only you can do this or only you can do that. So that still would exist, correct?
That is correct. And the implications of that, if it wasn't a straight up and down ratification question, if it was more of a, you know, do you approve the budget as it was approved, or do you choose to modify it question, or something more complicated like that, the implications of modifying it are that very likely, unless there's some other change in the revenue streams that we learn of between now and then, that we would have to issue modified tax bills. But that's a big deal. You know, we would issue the bills for the first quarter, and then depending on what happened at town meeting, if it was different from what the select board decides, you know, we would be collecting a different amount of property taxes, and we would issue modified tax bills for the final 3 quarters. That's a really normal process. It's not an annual process by any means, but it's a really normal thing that is provided for in the statutes already as just part of operating town government. So that could certainly unfold that way. I know this is a very serious topic, but a little bit of levity. When I testified before both committees in the Senate and the House regarding the special legislation that made this possible for the select board to adopt this budget. And they were concerned because it's so much more normal across the state, and has often been normal in Brattleboro, that town meetings scrutinize a select board's recommended budget and chip away at it. They were concerned about what this would do to disrupt the democratic process, and mostly from the point in their debate in the legislature, mostly from the perspective of whether it would inhibit town meeting from reducing a recommended budget or an adopted budget by the select board. And I told them, you know, I related to them the facts of the most recent 2 years of Brattleboro town government, where the select board has recommended a budget and representative town meeting has increased that budget, has found ways in which they thought more should be done, and was willing to tax themselves, tax all of us a little higher in order to do more service and more good in the community. So I can tell you that brought more than a few chuckles from the members of the legislature, and I think actually probably put their mind at ease somewhat in terms of the process, at least as it would likely play out in Brattleboro.
Oscar?
Yeah, just to follow up, that all makes sense, and it might be the way I would do it if it were my decision, and I think it's totally responsible and reasonable line of thought. I would just, I'd love to, I'm going to get off the line and mute my video in a minute, but to hear some discussion on the board, if there's interest and concern in sort of making sure that town meeting gets to have its say, because the text of the bill is pretty straightforward. It gives the select board the temporary authority to approve the budget. There's really, from what I've read, there isn't a ton of mechanism in there to make sure that town meeting has a say. So I don't know. I think it's a discussion that people would be interested to see the select board have. So that's all. But thank you.
Thanks, Oscar. And I'll assume you mean beyond what we've already had, with a lot of reassuring comments. But Daniel had his hand up.
Oh, I was just kind of pointing out that we get this ability to do this once and once only, right? This is not like we can do this for future years. You know, this is just a one-off. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've already kind of said what I want to say about this budget. I feel like we worked really hard on it for a number of months. You know, I asked my question about what the warning will look like. Beyond that, I don't really have any additional comments.
And it's got pie charts for the first time.
It has pie charts. Some of those were in color briefly in the library for about 2 weeks, and then
Maybe we can bring that back.
They're in color in our packets.
Yeah.
Yes, Liz.
While Oscar is nearby, I just wanted to thank him for the mask tree in Plenty Park. It's so useful, so helpful, and so charming. And I want to thank him and all the sewers who made all the masks. It just turned kind of an onerous thing into a really sweet thing. And I thank him for his creativity and his hard work.
Thanks, Oscar.
Yeah. Brandy.
I just wanted to say that I definitely am going to be, as we're drafting the warning and making our plans and understanding how and if, which I don't even have a grasp on how we're going to do this, but we're a team and we'll figure it out. I'm definitely going to be making it clear that I want representative town meeting to have their say, to look at it, to scrutinize it, to talk it up and down. We're doing this because we have to, but that doesn't mean I want to take away what we usually do. And so I'm definitely going to be vocal, and I think you're going to have support from this board, Oscar, and the reps are going to have support from this board to do what you do best.
Thank you. And I'll just point out that this is why we're talking about it first meeting in June and not the second meeting in June. Want to be able to kick it around a little bit before actual adoption. Liz?
In summarizing everyone's comments, I would just say this is a time for more democracy, not less.
Absolutely. Always messy, but always the right way to go. So do folks want to move on to the next item?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you'd like to have this warned for 2 weeks from tonight as adoption 21, as you had previously recommended it.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Yeah, because we do have to move it in within June, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it's got to be done before the end of June. So it's in effect by July 1st.
That is our unanimous consensus. Sorry, I'm losing my words. Must be getting a little late.
Yep.
So next, we have parking fund budget to discuss.
Yes.
That'll be our last bit of unfinished business, hopefully.
So the parking fund budget is really straightforward. The main issue related to the parking fund is the fact that it has had no operating revenue for the last few months. We talked about that a good bit last time. The budget itself is, a break-even budget, very, very similar to the budget of the utility fund, where there's a small decline in the revenues and an even smaller increase in the expenses, an increase of just 0.4% in the expenses. But where the major concern going forward in the parking fund, well, at first I should note for the record that we expressed to you a week ago tonight the intention of resuming parking enforcement operations by July 1st. And I feel as though while there wasn't an action of the board, and there didn't need to be an action of the board in that regard, but that we had a consensus among us about that. I'd like you to make clear to me if you have any different opinion, but otherwise we're moving in that direction. That's an important part of this particular piece of business, because if we waited any longer than July 1st, then we're going to have even a longer period without revenue. And this FY21 budget anticipates that there'll be 12 months of operation of the parking enforcement activity. So we're moving in the direction towards July 1st. We have presented you with a budget that is, approximately break even, and that we believe going forward, based on what we've seen in the change of the revenue stream, because we're writing so many fewer tickets, which is a really great thing, that the more digital system that is more modern and more flexible is, as Patrick described last week, allowing users of the system to have more successful outcomes. So people are paying for their parking instead of struggling to pay for their parking and ending up with tickets. But as there's an impact of that on the revenue of the fund, where in our current rate structure, we no longer make more money than we spend. And so we no longer have some money that's accumulating to be able to reinvest in the infrastructure of the parking system. We certainly aren't recommending at this time a rate increase in parking, but it begs the question that Daniel brought up earlier and some of the rest of you spoke to, of given that the general fund is coming in so much better off for the closure of FY20 than what we had expected. And given that we know there are some substantial capital needs, one in particular that has an impact not just on the parking facility, but on the rented retail area below, because of the leaking that happens from the transportation center down into the retail space. We have these significant capital needs, and we don't have the funds in the parking fund to address them. So if you decide that you'd like to move money from the general fund to the parking fund, then it's certainly within your authority to do that. And it might be best to postpone final action on the parking fund budget until the meeting on the 16th, so that we can bring you an item that would cause that transfer. We can do some research about what an appropriate amount of transfer would look like, bring you a regular good, a piece of staff work that would put the decision in context with a recommendation that you could either adopt or adjust, but would position you well so that you could make that transfer, and so that that could be reflected in the parking fund budget that you would adopt for the new fiscal year.
Okay.
Absolutely. Liz?
I agree with Daniel's suggestion and Peter's words, because one of the reasons is that we ask other landlords to be responsible landlords and repair things on a timely basis, and we should be modeling that behavior for ourselves.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. Oh, sorry, my bad. Good.
No, I was making a bad joke. Daniel, did you have something?
Yeah, I had a question actually. Before we move out of parking, I was thinking about the parklets, and I was thinking about the upcoming fiscal year. So we're saying 12 parklets. Each parklet takes up 2 spaces. Those spaces are presumably the sort of higher rate spaces, do we have a projection for like what kind of revenue we would lose from those spaces? And I'm kind of assuming, because now we have the card payments, that there must be a way to like say this meter brought in this much revenue from card payments over this period of time.
I believe that the system is that specific. You know, can be, the data can be looked at in that granular a form. We could bring Patrick on to take that dive right now if you'd like. What I could say generally in answer to that question is there will be some reduction in revenue, but I think it's going to be more marginal than just losing the revenue that would otherwise have been collected in those parklet spaces. Because given the capacity of parking downtown, I think what we should expect is people who would have parked in that higher cost space on street will go into the parking lot or into the transportation center and a little more cost effectively, but still pay into the system.
Yeah, that's what I was assuming as well. I was just wondering whether the difference between those two scenarios would have a meaningful impact.
Yeah, it's something that we could analyze and bring back as part of the information for next time, if that's helpful to you. I mean, you've already authorized the parklets, so the impact's going to happen, but you'd at least know what that cost estimate is when you're adopting the parking fund budget.
I think it's reasonable to see if we can get some of that info. Yeah, there'll certainly be some impact. Liz?
If that impact becomes significant, is that something that can be accounted for with program income to reimburse the parking fund?
That's a trickier proposition, since I'd be an interfund transfer rather than a purchase to support the economic development activity. But we can look into that as well.
Yeah, because we are offering up this lack of parking funds
like
for the benefit of economic development.
Yep. We'll look at both. We'll look at quantifying the impact and then whether or not it can be covered by program income.
Great. So it seemed like we're all in favor of having staff come back next time with some proposals. I mean, I think just throwing it out there, we were talking about the roof repair. There was also some lot resurfacing that was pushed off. Am I correct in that?
You are correct, at the Preston lot.
I mean, it may be something
to include both. Why don't we itemize them?
A la carte, yeah.
Pick off a menu.
That'd be great.
Everybody okay with it? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
So trying to move us along a little bit here. I trust that someone would have chimed in, but I haven't reminded folks in a while. But I think it'd be appropriate to move on to new business, if that's okay with everyone.
Yes.
And so our next item is the fiscal year 21 solid waste budget.
So that one you're seeing for the first time this evening, but it is both really straightforward and limited in scope and relatively fixed. There's not much in here that you can work with. We are asking that you consider adopting it this evening, even though it'll be on the first review of it. If you have any concerns about what's in front of you, or you have any questions you want us to bring back, then obviously we're happy to do that. If you think that it's just a better practice to discuss it tonight and not adopt it until 2 weeks from tonight so the public knows what you're going to adopt, we can also handle it that way. What we would say is it is a budget that continues to be strained by the success of the operation. So, it's really remarkable the amount of garbage that has been diverted into the recycling and compost waste streams in Brattleboro over the last several years. And as a result, because we raise the operating revenue, the one variable source of revenue for this operation has been the sale of bags, and the sale of bags has been far less than what we expected. And simultaneously, the cost per ton of processing recycling materials has gone, several times higher. It is several times higher than it was just 2 or 3 years ago. The combination of those two has put us in the red every year in recent history in this operation. And so, again, this year, we are asking you to make a transfer of $40,000 from the general fund to the solid waste fund. Solid waste fund is a bit of a misnomer for it because it doesn't stand alone as an enterprise fund the way the utility fund and the parking fund do. It has just had its own budget since the advent of pay-as-you-throw so that it could be shown what the solid waste revenue stream is compared to the solid waste expenditures. But it doesn't actually exist as a separate fund in town accounting. And increasingly, because it has been so dependent on this general fund transfer each year, it was over $100,000 a couple of years ago, and then it was $40,000 last year, $40,000 again this year. We have been coming to believe, staff has, and it is now an official recommendation of Representative Town Meeting's Finance Committee, that this just be reincorporated into the general fund budget. The solid waste expenditures and revenues used to be part of the general fund budget as you would adopt a general fund budget, as you would recommend it. Representative Town Meeting would adopt it. And it's been for the last 5 or 6 years that it's been separated out in this way. We don't think that serves a useful public purpose. The Finance Committee doesn't think that serves a useful public purpose. We actually think town operations would be more transparent if it was embedded in the general fund budget so that it could be seen there as part of the overall operations of town government. It would be part of the budget that Representative Town Meeting would have authority over instead of being dealt with separately by the town, by the select board. And so for all those reasons, we would recommend to you that you authorize the necessary $40,000 transfer for this year, that you approve the budget as it's presented tonight for FY21, and that you direct staff in accordance with our recommendation and the Finance Committee's recommendation to not separately do a solid waste budget next year, but rather when we bring you, the select board, a proposed FY22 budget in approximately the 1st of November, that it include these solid waste related revenues and expenditures.
Great. Thank you, Peter. I have strong feelings about all 3 ideas, but I'm going to let everybody else speak first. Anybody have an opinion? That was just a sigh, right, Brandy? Or...
Yeah, I just always have just feelings about this budget. I'm not ready to talk about them yet.
Did I say what I was thinking? I'm not seeing everybody else.
I think Ian wanted to chime in.
Ian, I think. Ian keeps
Ian,
waving his hand by.
Got to wave it higher up.
Yeah.
I'm too low. Yeah, I'm voicing my opinion only to see if maybe Tim and I will disagree. I feel like we should totally put it into the general fund. And I'm kind of feeling the same way about the parking fund. I don't know. I understand we talked a lot about that last week and about the parking fund. But yeah, for this one, it just makes absolutely no sense why, if we're just continually putting money from the general fund into it. But I would say because we're thinking about doing that, we should wait and do it next week. We should talk about it now and then we should do it next week because there may be people who want to talk about it more.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you were wrong. I actually feel very strongly we should incorporate it into the general fund budget. And I think when Brandy was chair and I was vice chair, we used to joke that budget brain doesn't kick in until October.
Yeah.
and it's really more appropriate to talk about budgets altogether, I think. No way I want to talk about parking fund budget since we just talked about it.
Yeah, I should have brought it up.
No, it's okay. And I looked through it, and that's what we don't agree on is that I looked through it. I couldn't find anything that I thought needed to be talked out, and I think members of the public will want to just tell us that they don't like pay as you throw. That's what they'll tell us. So, but I'm totally happy to defer to waiting if that makes the other board members more comfortable. But I'm all for pushing forward with whatever everybody wants to do, because I don't see a problem with picking up all three. Daniel?
I'm good to go tonight. You know, this is a big agenda. If we kick some things onto the next one, it's another big agenda. Let's, you know, it is a fine budget. It makes sense. Put it in the general fund.
Yeah, let's kick it in that fund. Kick it in there. Tired of looking at it.
Ian, did you just get steamrollered, or what happened?
I just got. I gracefully retract that.
I was bullied earlier, so it's just.
Oh my God, bullied.
These fragile men.
Oh,
Right.
Am I correct
It's
that
getting late, I think.
Ian thought if we moved it to next week, a lot more people would chime in? Ian, is that your thought?
No. I just, you know, I can say that the select board has received some information from people since I've been on about the waste management, and so it's clearly there are people in the public who care about this, and that's all. But no, I have no idea, Liz.
I just thought you had, you know, inside information that we should all be informed of.
I'm just gathering up a huge group of people to.
All right. Well, I did earlier ask for comments for budget-related items, and I don't see any more chiming in, and I don't see a caller. I think whoever's moved to make some motions could do so, unless I'm forgetting something, Peter.
No, we're ready for the three motions, please.
Okay.
all right.
All together, or?
You could merge them, or you could deal with them separately. It sounds as though there's a consensus that you want to approve all three, so the maker of the motion could just say and, you know, and include the other language.
Indeed.
I'll do it because I feel like I've been slacking because I didn't have stuff in front of me earlier. I'll do all three of them. So exciting.
Brave, thank you.
Here we go. I move to authorize a transfer in the amount of $40,000 from the general fund to the solid waste fund, and I move to approve the FY21 solid waste budget as presented, and move to approve incorporating all solid waste revenues and expenditures into the annual general fund budget beginning in FY22. Hallelujah. Let's do it.
Thank you, Brandy. Brandy has made a motion, a three-part motion to authorize a transfer in the amount of $40,000 from the general fund to the solid waste fund, to approve the fiscal year 21 solid waste budget as presented, and to approve incorporating all solid waste revenues and expenditures into the annual general fund budget beginning in fiscal year 22. All those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
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 Wonderful. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, everybody.
Can I make a quick request that there's nothing to do with the money side of things? Last year, we inquired with Casella, hey, what's up with recycling? And they gave us this really wonderful, detailed response. I'm going to ask it again. What's up with recycling in COVID times? Like, you know, I know people in the community are just really interested in it, and it would be nice if they can provide an update to get that.
And they've been home throwing things out.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Liz.
They've been home throwing things out.
Yeah, lots of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll ask for that information and circulate it when we get it. Certainly.
That's a good idea. I still think that this whole recycling thing, the problem with it costing us so much, is going to come back. But I'm not sure I base that on any kind of evidence other than hopeless optimism at this point. So our next on our agenda is a Windham Solid Waste Management District payment in lieu of taxes, otherwise known as pilot. This one sounds easy and fun, Peter.
I believe it is easy. We've received a pilot in the amount of 5.5% of the town's assessment. The actual value of this has gone down over the years because the amount of the assessment has gone down. That's actually a good thing in the overall operation of the solid waste program and the solid waste district. They have become more able to, and more sustainable on the revenues from the compost operation and the solar array that's up there and a few other ventures that they have there on the property. So that they now collect less money from the members of the district. So that's a good thing in the big picture. The rebate that we get as a result of the fact that we are the host community for the solid waste district has gone down because it is a factor of the 5.5%. The way the pilot is determined is it's 5.5% of whatever we pay in the assessment. And so with that acknowledgement, I would say that there have been some of the other member towns who wonder whether, as this payment becomes smaller and smaller, whether it's really necessary to make it at all, and whether there's really any special burden to the town to be the host community, especially because it is acknowledged, we have acknowledged publicly and are happy about the fact that we get a fair amount of property tax revenue now from that operation because of the solar array, where it used to be not a generator of property taxes. So in any event, the point is there's a balancing act here, and there's been some occasionally lively debate in that setting about whether the town ought to receive a pilot at all. And the board of the solid waste district has agreed to continue the current arrangement for 2 more years.
Great.
So we think from the town of Brattleboro's perspective, that's an easy yes to continue the current arrangement for 2 more years, and hopefully beyond that, but we'll see based on future consideration.
Terrific. Liz?
I wanted to congratulate town staff for those negotiations. That was really good.
And that's Patrick entirely. Patrick Moreland is both the staff person who deals the most of any other town staff person with the solid waste district staff, and he's your appointed representative to the solid waste district board. So in both capacities, he carried this ball really well.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. And Ian, in case you don't know, or anyone watching, it was for a while a member of the board that was served in that capacity, and then we got lazy, I don't know, last year or something, and asked Patrick to take up some slack because he's so good at it, basically.
I'd be happy to explain that to Ian offline.
So it depends on how far down the rabbit hole you want to go on that one there. But fascinating stories. And thank you also to the WSWMD board for that as well. So I shouldn't talk about it as if it's already done. Who wants to make a motion?
I'll do it. I move to approve a 2-year pilot agreement with the Windham Solid Waste Management District as presented.
Thanks, Daniel. Daniel has moved to approve a 2-year pilot agreement with the Windham Solid Waste Management District as presented. All those in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
That's 5-0. Thank you. Yeah, now we're moving. Okay, here's one.
Yeah.
That's never
Put your
happened.
feet up.
Item C.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Tee us up there, Peter. Thank you.
So this is the discussion of options for representative town meeting. A couple of really broad points initially I'd like to make, and then I'll walk through the memorandum dated May 29th that I provided to you that's in the backup. The first really broad thing I want to say is this is very much a preliminary conversation. This is a fluid situation. It's a challenging situation. It's we at this time, given the constraints of how many people are allowed to gather in a single location in the state of Vermont, we don't think it is safe or prudent to warn a representative town meeting yet. We think it's going to be some time yet before it's possible to do that. So the purpose of tonight's discussion is to have that first bite at, looking at some options staff has considered based on things we've thought of ourselves and based on things we've heard in some cases from some of you and in some cases from people in the community, where we've tried to look at, the best way that a representative town meeting can be held that will be most like the way it happens when we all are in one large room together. That's the intent. You talked earlier about the importance of representative town meeting. I think we all acknowledge that. It's a really significant determining part of our democratic processes, right? There's the staff work that we do daily, and there's the leadership that you provide, every 2 weeks throughout the year, doing, major policy direction. But once a year, the people come together as elected representatives at town meeting to make the biggest decisions, to decide when we borrow money, to approve the annual budget in any normal circumstances, and the other, major appointments and other major decisions that get made. And so, so it's important for us to provide an opportunity for this year's process to be as close as possible to a normal year. But the sad truth is, I think we need to accept that it can't be the way it is in a normal year. We've been holding out for a while, hoping that we might be able to find a way to be in one room together. And unless somebody's got a really great idea, and I hope maybe that really great idea is out there somewhere, but we don't think there is a way forward to accomplish that. And so we think we have to look creatively at an array of alternatives and see which one feels like it's the most appropriate facsimile for this year of representative town meeting to accomplish the purposes for which representative town meeting exists. So there's that. It's a preliminary discussion. It's an assessment of sort of the broad array of options, and it's an invitation for people to throw things out that might add to this mix or might narrow it down as you have your discussion tonight. The other thing I would say about it is I have a sort of a caveat I need to, or an apology to reveal about the piece of backup. So our intention was to show the 6 different alternatives that we've presented to you for discussion in order. It was I should say, actually, my intention was in presenting this, that in my personal opinion, these are in descending order from most desirable to least desirable. And we'll talk about them substantively in a minute. But the most desirable being that we just do it like we normally do, but maybe in a different location, or maybe, just at a, if COVID had gone differently, maybe just by the benefit of a different time, that in July or August, perhaps we could go to the BUHS gym and hold our annual town meeting. So starting with that and going down to, for me, the bottom least desirable one on this list is where it's entirely in this format. I think that the likelihood is that there will be elected representatives who will be unable to participate in the meeting if we try to do 180 people participating in a GoToMeeting format or a Zoom format. I just think that's not possible. It's very possible to hold a webinar on a platform like this, where there's a few people presenting and a bunch of people watching and able to ask questions either in the chat box or otherwise. That works really well, but having evenly distributed opportunity to participate among just that sheer number of people, I think is going to be impossible. And even if that were possible, having to have a meeting that is intended to benefit from the interaction of humans in this format is going to leave some members of our community behind for just the lack of access to good equipment or the lack of ability to use the equipment that they have access to. There's just some people that are less comfortable with working with technology. So it is my opinion that we should not further pursue the idea of holding a representative town meeting entirely on this platform, which leaves 4 things in between. And in those 4 things, I intended to highlight one of them as being what staff believe and moderator Lauren Crisp believe is the preferred one of the 4. And I came to realize in going over this actually with a couple of you in the past few days that the highlighting I had intended to do of the 3rd option didn't really come in the publishing back. I apologize for that. So I'll just note for the record before kind of working down through that list that the one that moderator Lauren Crisp and the town staff believe is the most workable solution that will be the best, our best foot forward collectively at replicating the democratic processes of representative town meeting is to have approximately this number of boxes in a GoToMeeting setting, which are the platform on which the meeting would be held would be GoToMeeting, but instead of individuals having to connect to it, it would be somewhere between 5 and 8 venues in town, different locations around town. And in each one of those locations, BCTV would have a fully functional production setup. It might be 1 camera if we go to 8 locations. It might be simplified. Or if we're able to do 5, you know, maybe they've got a couple of cameras at each spot. But in any event, they would be responsible for the sound and the video for each of the locations. So they're able to bring their technical expertise and their professional equipment to the connectivity of the meeting. And then in the way the meeting would function, it has this very significant downside, but in a way that after looking at this thoroughly between staff and Lauren, we think can be addressed, which is Lauren's job as moderator, rather than scanning the room to make sure that each individual person is getting a fair opportunity to participate. His job as moderator for this 1 year would shift to making sure that each of the different locations was having a fair opportunity to participate. And we would have a secondary system that we'd need to rely upon that hopefully, ideally, would involve each separate district being in its own location. That will require, based on the number of members in a district and then a couple of staff people and some BCTV people in each of these spots, it'll require that there be, that we be permitted to have up to 60 people, 60 people in a room. We're hopeful that maybe we're getting there. We're up to 25. And if it goes to 50 but never goes higher than that, maybe for this purpose, for this important, you know, public business, this democratic process, maybe we can get some special dispensation from the state to allow us to be 60 people but practicing social distancing together in each location. Because ideally, for this to work in a way that is optimizing the opportunity under these difficult circumstances, each district would be together in a room, and therefore the district chair would be able to be the person who is helping to keep the process fair and balanced and everybody having an equal opportunity to participate within that room, and be the person that Lauren would rely upon to connect him and his moderating responsibilities into that room. If we can't do that, if we can't have up to 60 people in a room and we have to have smaller numbers, then what we envision, and that's why we talk about it in terms of 5 to 8, then what we would envision is each district being in 2 separate locations, and we'd have to come up with some other way. You know, there might have to just be 2 co-chairs elected this year by the districts or something. We could figure out how to do that. But in any event, there'd have to be a secondary moderator in each of those 2 locations. But otherwise it would function about the same. So there'd be either 3 or 6 district locations, and then an additional one that would have the select board and Bob Fisher and myself, and an additional one that would have Lauren and Hillary as town clerk and possibly a couple of support folks. There'd be BCTV at every location. And likely, but we really hadn't decided once and for all about the public. That's just something we kind of need to talk through as one of the details that isn't resolved. We don't have an opinion at this point about, or a strong one at least, about whether the public is in the room with the select board and the town attorney and the town manager, or whether the public is in the room with Lauren and Hillary. I think that Lauren would tell you that he thinks that the public ought to be with us, because that preserves that sort of independence of the moderator in terms of him doing the best he can under these circumstances this year to keep it all fair, that only he and Hillary would be together with whatever support staff they need. But the acknowledgement of a member of the public getting the floor to speak, or a member of the select board or Bob or me, would be the same kinds of circumstances, presumably with Tim as the one who was in control of that room, that it'd be the same kind of circumstances as what the districts are experiencing. So that's what we see as the best way forward. There was also some consideration, we have given consideration to doing an outdoor location where it would be, sort of just like in the gym, but in some outdoor setting under a big tent or a few tents. We have come to think that's not workable for a number of different reasons. Accessibility and bathrooms are pretty significant challenges to that option. And even greater is we have no control over the weather, to state boldly the obvious. And at the time of year we're talking about holding this, we could have a very rainy day or we could have a beastly hot day. And either of those two outcomes would really interfere with holding an effective meeting. And so we don't think we should further pursue looking at an outdoor meeting. There's also an alternative presented here of doing a two-stage process, which is done in a lot of communities around Vermont, or at least in some other communities around Vermont, where they have a town meeting where the decisions are made on Australian balloting, but there's a discussion meeting that's held ahead of time. It's almost like our information meeting and then the town meeting, but it's not quite that, because the information meeting is meant more for questions, and the discussion meeting is intentionally an interactive process among the members. We don't think that that's nearly as good an option. The voting on Australian ballot, we think, diminishes the democratic process by not having the members of representative town meeting be able to amend the warned items, or I should say the motions that are made on the warned items, where they'd have to vote yes or no on each question that's on the warning. But at least it would have the advantage of a discussion that would happen in this kind of a format ahead of time. And then there's a fifth option here that is just going straight to Australian ballot. And frankly, personally, I think that's pretty well tied for last with the trying to do 180 people on GoToMeeting, because there's no interaction. We lose all that value of this being a group of people elected by the people of Brattleboro to discuss these things and work through them and find a way to reach as much consensus as possible. You lose all of that to just casting a ballot, vote on a piece of paper. So like I said, we're happy to explore other options that either you have a good idea about or a member of the public has a good idea about. We certainly need to refine the one that we're recommending, but for the fullness of, I've probably gone on too long, but of, what I've just described, we feel pretty strongly that the 5 to 8 venue GoToMeeting hybrid arrangement is the best way to go.
Thank you for the summary. I'm sure everyone's thought about this a lot already. Liz?
I just would hope, it sounds like it's the way to go, and of course everyone is disappointed, but I would just hope that Lauren and Hillary have all the support they need, because it sounds complicated.
Yep.
Especially for them.
Daniel?
Sounds like a lot of testing would need to be done with BCTV if we're going to be in multiple locations. I guess I've never really known what the deal is with BCTV. Like, I know that they work so hard to bring people all these meetings, and that money comes from their funding through cable and so forth. And like, this seems like they would be going above and beyond for our town meeting.
Yep. We would pay for the services, and we might need to pay to buy some equipment. So that would all have to be part of what gets fleshed out in much more detail. If you agree that we should continue further down this path and put some better definition to the details of how this would work, part of that would be identifying costs related to relying on BCTV in this way.
Oh, this
so-
coronavirus.
Right. So we're talking like 180 people, and like currently 25 is the max that's allowed to be in one place. So that's 7.2 places. Sounds like, you know, a few school gyms, a few, the Selectboard meeting room, I don't know, library.
Yeah,
Seems like it's not that far
BCTV
away.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
BCTV has an opinion about that.
Okay.
I don't actually know all the different venues in sort of their order of preference. I know the select board meeting room would be one of them. It's pretty likely we'd be there. But there are other locations where they're pre-wired, and it's just much more effective for them to go in and set up and run it from that spot. And then some other places, I don't think they're pre-wired for enough places to do the whole thing that way. And so there's probably going to be other places that are desirable just based on, you know, something about that location being easier for them. So for instance, you know, I could see that in what Lauren and Hillary and a small need maybe could be in BCTV's studio, right? Because that's as wired as anything that BCTV does. To do, you know, be very flexible for their needs. And then we're pre-wired down in the select board meeting room. So that certainly should be a location, and we're probably the next smallest group. So I think it would make sense for us to go there. Where the districts go is, you know, I think we need to really rely on BCTV to tell us what locations are going to make it the simplest, most reliable way for them to, you know, see the production of this meeting, try the production of this meeting.
Jesus Christ.
That's the dog.
Can you let her in? She's being cool.
I will just say that I do have some experience with BCTV. I served on the board for 11 years, and I have video experience. So it's definitely doable. It's going to take a little planning and testing, absolutely, and probably a couple extra cameras, but they're not huge expenses, maybe a switcher or two. So, I mean, I'm sort of simultaneously fearful and excited about the possibility. It is the one, in my opinion, that preserves the most democracy out of all of these. Well, not the most, because the top two were obviously the best choices, but just not sure that can happen at all. They're sort of in a separate category of wishful thinking, I think. I have something that occurred to me while you were outlining things, but I think I could just, it's a technical issue. Well, it's not just technical. Let me just throw it out because I don't think we have to solve it. But I think the wonderfulness of this stops at the point where we're assuming every single town meeting member is going to be comfortable with a certain number of people in the same venue. And that's for a vulnerable person or an older person or any kind of immunocompromised. That's a large ask, possibly, especially within a couple months. So, and that's all a very personal decision that they would have to make for that. So figuring out, I mean, I hate to bring in the phone thing because I know how much I hate the phone thing. It's difficult. But if there was a phone option, and I don't know how that would work, but if there was a, you know, an option for, you know, someone to step forward, or 10 RTM members to say, no, I'm really not comfortable, despite all of, you're going to obviously go through all kinds of cautions and, you know, wiping surfaces down and spacing and all that stuff. But despite that, we might have some people who are not comfortable and really feel the need to be at home, or I don't know, in a group of 5 instead of a group of 27 or whatever it ends up being. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there. I don't think it's insurmountable, but it might be something that we have to expect. Ian?
Yeah, I think sort of to echo that a little, it's kind of just this feeling of like, you know, we're gonna cram as many people into a space that we're allowed to have based on the governor's orders, and, you know, hopefully maintain the social distancing. If the whole point of why we're doing this is to be safe during COVID-19, that it doesn't really sit well with me either. I'm wondering would there be a way to do this same idea of multiple places, but do them outside? Because that has been something that's been shown to so greatly reduce the risk. Because I'm thinking like, so we put 60 people in a room, they all have to be wearing masks, they need to be all maintaining social distance if they can. It also starts to feel a little impractical. And if the whole idea is we're trying to stay safe, maybe that gets compromised.
Liz?
Instead of being outside, I would think that what we'd want to look for in the venue for these larger number of people is sufficient air handling, you know, like windows that open and, you know, air circulation that's doesn't recirculate or whatever.
Yeah.
Just kind of keep the air moving with the benefits of if it were outside, but still the shelter and, you know, restrooms that are inside.
Yeah. Brandy?
The passing around of the microphone is creeping me out. I know we'll sanitize it. I just don't know if it'll get rid of my creeped out feeling.
I was imagining stepping up to the mic just at regular town meeting. But
Yeah.
Yeah, but
That is what we're expecting too, although
Yeah.
it is still going to be a shared mic. There's no way to
That's
get
what
around.
I meant to say,
shared
yeah.
mic. But yeah, we anticipate it being on a stand like the regular town meeting.
No touching.
But spittle. Ugh.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Would it
Let me
be
tell you,
possible
as
for
somebody that's trying to figure out how to reopen a radio station where all of our equipment is shared high-touch equipment,
Mm.
it ain't no
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
would it be possible for people to, you know, bring their own microphone?
We can explore that. I don't think it's going to be possible to do that, but there might be. We'll explore how to try to make the microphone thing safer. That's it. We definitely, it can't be passed, right? If it's passed from hand to hand, that's it can't be done that way. How can we make sure that it's as safe as possible when it's a mic on a stand being shared, or is there some technological alternative? We'll keep looking at that.
Okay.
And I just the science nerd just has to remind everybody that the learning is becoming, it's more obvious that it's the proximity and the speaking and the shouting and not the surfaces. That's the new data coming in.
Well, there's a lot of shouting at RTM.
That's what I was just gonna say. They better keep that stuff down.
At least there's no singing. Singing's
Yeah.
supposed to be terrible. Yeah.
Sometimes there is.
Yeah.
Sometimes there is, that's right.
That's true.
You know, this kind of gets back to I don't really do it at meetings. I try to avoid it, but on a personal basis, talking to friends, I just talk about everyone's different level of comfort with risk. And I try to avoid the use of the term safe, because there's no safe, obviously. So we're not keeping people safe, we're reducing risk, I think is a great way to talk about it. But yeah, I actually, the only, if you really are interested in reducing the most amount of risk, is we're talking about our two other what we think is possible, not the full-on go-to meeting logistical nightmare, but the Australian ballot choice of having a pre-Wild West go-to meeting first and then Australian ballot. That's the safest, that's the most risk reduction, but
True.
you know, you risk something when you cross the street as well. Daniel.
I just want to kind of like say that we do it all in exactly the same way on this kind of platform. Whilst it would be unwieldy, it's not impossible. It just needs really good facilitation, and everybody needs to be very kind and patient. And then there's the technological challenges, right? So like there's a person that is often on a video call with me and we can never hear him. But if we knew in advance that some people had limitations and needed certain equipment or, you know, practice or training or support, we could provide that, you know, given how much lead time we'd have. I don't want to like dismiss it out of hand. Like I know it wouldn't be great, and I really hope we wouldn't have a 13-hour meeting if we were on that platform.
Jesus.
You know, but it's not impossible.
I think you make a good point because if we have to go in that direction, we'd probably be making that decision in October, November, December, rather than, because we're hoping for this possible window of, you know, everyone feeling a little more comfortable with being together, right? If that window closes and that becomes one of our only options, other than, I don't know what the other option would be. It's an interesting thought.
Do you see Elizabeth's question?
I just, I think we need to explore and be comfortable with the public attending with the select board, because we don't know how many people that is that would be interested in attending. And, you know, that's exposing the select board and the public to, that's, you know, the same as the town meeting reps. That's a bunch of people in a room, and we just have to all be comfortable with that.
And if we do further explore that option and others, maybe we should be thinking of it as 5 to 9 instead of 5 to 8 for exactly that reason. That, you know, maybe there's a room where we are with Bob and a separate room where the public is invited to come. The organization of that separate room would be trickier because there's no sort of
Moderating person.
yeah, no given co-moderator for that room, right? So we probably just have to designate one. There'd probably be like a member of town staff. The town staff, the management team sits with the public at this meeting, and you know, maybe one of them is responsible for that room. Would be a way to do that.
That would be helpful, I think.
Okay, so, yes, sorry, I just caught up. I guess I'm not looking at this as often as I thought. Elizabeth would like to comment on ASL interpretation first, and then Franz would like to comment.
Thank you. I just, while you're having the discussion about all the considerations, and there are a lot of them, just one thing to remember too is ASL interpretation is typically provided for a representative town meeting. So far, this platform is working fantastic. Should it go to more than, let's say, 9 boxes, we get really minuscule, and so it kind of is moot to have us there. So if you want fully accessible meetings, it's possible. Just remember your limitations on how many boxes are shown on screen at once. So it might even be, if you're designating rooms, it might be not 5 to 8, but maybe 5 to 9, 10, if the interpreters had the separate rooms, so we still have our own camera like we have currently. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I'm always happy to talk to people about logistics and making sure that things are accessible. So tag me in. Thanks.
It's great. Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Franz.
Yes. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Then I will speak. So, for the benefit of all those other interested people out there, this is Franz Reichsman speaking. So a couple things. One is just to respond to Liz's idea about air circulation. Air circulation is bad in this setting. What you want is absolutely dead air so that any virus particles settle to the ground instead of being recirculated again and again, where they're much more likely to end up in somebody's body. So just a minor point, but you know, there's the importance of that is that there's a lot of details to think through here. The other thing is that I think as you're putting together any idea, you have to factor in that there's a significant lead time and that the conditions under which we're meeting could change at any time. If you talk to any epidemiologist anywhere, they'll tell you there's going to be a second peak of infection, and we don't know when that's going to be. So whatever plan you create, other than the 180 people on GoToMeeting or Australian ballot, anything else that you put in place may all of a sudden be completely upended again, depending on what's going on with the infection. So anyway, I would just really include that in your thinking, that something that may not be a desirable solution may turn out to be the only possible solution.
Thank you, Franz.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, what do you want to do? It's getting a little late.
Move on. Cancel representative town meeting.
May I just summarize what I think I've heard so you know where we'll go from here?
Yes, please.
That work? So I hear that we feel pretty fatalistic about the first two. We'd love to hold one that way in one big room or in one space outside, and we don't really think that's going to be possible at all this summer. So we're not going to really spend much more time thinking about that. But of the other four, and I didn't hear really a different alternative come into play tonight either, which isn't to say that it can't in the future if somebody has a great idea. But at this point of the other four, what I think I'm hearing is we should further examine the everybody on GoToMeeting option to see if there's a way to make that work and put more energy into the details of the what has now become 5 to 10 venues option, with the two Australian ballot options being just the things we would fall back to if it seems impossible to do 5 to 10 venues and undesirable to do 180 people on GoToMeeting. Is that fair? So we won't really put extra energy at this point into the Australian ballot items. They're relatively simpler to implement if we have to fall back to them. But I'm hearing a consensus that those, we don't want to do those. So we need to be further exploring the other two that are in play to see if maybe we can make 180 people in this format feel more viable, and that we get more details for the other format, so that, or for this format with fewer venues, so that you, with public input, are able to make a more fully informed decision about what we're actually getting into. That sound right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I that's how I interpreted it.
Okay, so we'll keep doing that. I don't think we'll likely have something more for you 2 weeks from now, but we'll try to come to the first July meeting with better definition.
And I think we can kind of push the question out to RTM too.
Yes.
See what they think.
Yes, absolutely.
Can I add one thing I just thought of?
Yeah.
Just if someone is exhibiting symptoms and thinks maybe they have COVID-19 when the representative town meeting were to occur and still wanted to participate, or you had an individual who didn't feel comfortable being in any size group, if there would be a, for future discussion, to implement them in the RTM with one of these other systems, like with the 9 rooms or whatever, how we would do that.
Yep. So Tim had addressed that earlier, and I had made a note. That was one of the things that we need to follow up on, is how do we accommodate people who don't feel safe coming into a room of any size, any number of people.
Okay, my bad.
No.
No, I mean, you made
reiterating the importance of the point.
Yeah.
The additional point of diagnosis is an important one. Okay, so I'm starting to lose it. I don't know
Me too.
who else, but we're going to move on for now to award a bid. This is
Great. Yeah.
it would have been a big thing a while ago, and now it feels less of a big thing, but it's very important.
It is. The upper roof of the two roof sections at the police facility did not get replaced as part of the renovation of that building, because we wanted to make sure we ended up, we needed to know where we finished all of the essential parts of the job and how much money was left over at the end. A little over a year ago at representative town meeting, we were authorized to proceed with replacing this roof at an estimated cost of $100,000. And there were a few other final details that were authorized as part of that usage of the remaining funds from the bond for the police fire facilities projects. We have been out to bid for this work and received two bids. One was $120,500. The other was $98,860. And so we recommend that you award this project to Melanson of Keene, New Hampshire at $98,860.
Great.
Okay, well, any comments, questions? Personally, saying Steve Horton's name helps me feel better about
Good.
Trusted Steve Horton.
Steve.
Would anybody like to make a motion? I don't know where that motion is, but I'm glad I'm not making it.
Top of page 4 of the administrative report.
Thank you.
I will move to award a bid in the amount of $98,860 to the Melanson Company of Keene, New Hampshire for replacement of the high roof area at the Brattleboro Police Department.
Thank you, Brandy. Brandy's made a motion to award a bid in the amount of $98,860 to the Melanson Company for the replacement of the high roof area at the Brattleboro Police Department. All those in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Thank you. And we have Brandy's favorite topic.
Boo. Thumbs down.
We need to do the annual dog warrant.
Yes.
Ugh, so petty.
Which always causes confusion and consternation.
It does, because the state statute under which we're traveling here imposes an obligation on the town to adopt this warrant, and the requirement that the statutory language be in the warrant as set forth in the statutes, which include, among other things that are more pertinent to how we actually function, about the obligation of owners of dogs to license those dogs for the safety of the community, and some different provisions for how this gets enforced if an owner doesn't license their dog. It includes reference to the fact that if the owner doesn't comply with this upon being warned that the dog needs to get licensed, and then the owner doesn't comply, the penalty can be up to and including euthanizing the dog. We have never done that. We will never do that. We say every year at this moment, we will never do that. But we have to have that language in the document that you approve because the state requires it. So what the dog warrant does is it says this is the moment in the year when the deadline for registering dog or licensing dogs has passed, and there is a list of dogs whom we believe to still be living in Brattleboro based on prior records who have not been licensed yet this year. And so it's the notice to those dog owners that they are subject to enforcement action under this warrant They will each receive a letter asking them to get the dog licensed, and then there will start an enforcement process after that where they could be fined, or, you know, there's other penalties that will not include euthanizing the dog. This particular year, the deadline was not technically extended, but because the deadline is April 1st, and because a lot of payments come in during March, and because that's when COVID hit, we did take the action of waiving late fees for anybody who didn't license the dog by April 1st. That is still in effect. So when the reminders go out to tell people you really need to get your dog licensed, they are able to license remotely. They don't have to come to the town clerk's office to do that. And they won't have to pay a penalty. They'll just have to pay the annual licensing charge. But we really do need, for the safety of the community, to enforce the licensing requirement, and this is the mechanism for doing that.
Great. Oh, Brandy.
I'm glad to hear that, because this list looks longer to me than it usually does. And I'm wondering if people have just been living in chaos. And I don't know how much leniency we have, but even if we could open the letter with something like, I don't know what, something like, we know this has been crazy, or due to COVID-19, you likely forgot, or something, because this is a lot of dogs.
Totally agree. This is actually representative of what our worst fears were for property taxes, and thank goodness they didn't come through on property taxes. But yeah, there's a lot of folks who would normally have licensed their dog by now who just didn't this year.
Yeah, I just don't want to sound
we'll
like a jerk about it. Thank you.
Sure.
I think for me, it's, to quote Yogi Berra, deja vu all over again. Is it the dates for some of them are not late, right? So maybe I should just ask Hillary. She said,
Oh, I just messed that up.
So the dates, when it's in the future, that means that they don't need to be licensed, I believe, right? Hillary?
I'm here. Can you see me? Oh, there we are.
Yeah.
So the dates that are on there, I don't have the list in front of me. That the dates that you might be looking at are the dates that they need to get their rabies.
Exactly.
Oh. Okay.
And so they still need to license their dog. What we're seeing in response to what Brandy was saying in terms of the list being longer than normal, you're absolutely correct. It's way longer than normal. And part of the problem is vets' offices were closed, and a lot of people are trying to get into the vet, and there's a really long waiting lists. And so a lot of people can't get their dogs updated with their rabies shots. We had to cancel our rabies clinic, which a lot of people rely on. And so a lot of people have been calling saying, I want to license my dog, but I can't because I can't get that rabies shot. And so what we've talked about, in addition to waiving the late fee, is we've talked with Kathy Barrows in the police department, and Kathy's our animal control officer. And until further notice, there will be no ticketing for people who have not licensed their dogs yet as well. Those tickets won't happen. If we're at a point where we're ready to start issuing tickets, we will make sure that there's plenty of advance notice to anybody who's in danger of getting a ticket. But we do encourage people to not wait until that ticketing notice comes out, because there is that long waiting list. And we, like you all have been saying all evening, we don't know what's going to happen a few months from now. You know, if vets have to start closing their doors again, it's going to be an issue. So get that appointment booked now, even if it's for a month or two out. Schedule that so that you can get in and get your dog licensed as soon as possible, because it is still required and it is still really important for the health and safety of the community.
Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Peter.
Thank you. So this is unusual, but in this format, I just wanted to note for Hillary, I know that you've been on and you've been listening, so the letter is going to be modified to be a little kinder and gentler than it might normally be. Would you also please include what you just described about the way in which we're we're encouraging people to follow up as soon as possible with the vets because we know it's been hard for people to make those appointments, and it's really important they get this done and get licensed and whatever. You know the words to use, but I think it would be helpful for us, in addition to just being a little bit softer in our tone, to be really explicit about what we need them to do.
Absolutely. So just to clarify, we already sent out the second notices prior in May, saying, you know, this is coming up, and we had a lot of questions about it, and so we fielded a lot of questions. If the select board feels it's necessary and appropriate to send out a third notice, we certainly can. It might freak people out a little bit more if they're getting another notice. I'm inclined to recommend that we send out a notice prior to ticketing if and when we get to a point where we're ready to ticket, so that they're not then getting a fourth notice from us. But if the select board feels that a notice at this point is appropriate, I'm happy to do that.
I take your word on it.
Yep.
I'd agree. Hillary's strategy. All right, Ian.
Very quick question, newbie question. Where does this list come from? Like,
Yeah,
like
the dog cat.
like,
when you vote?
Santa.
tell the town clerk that you have a dog, or is it only people who have previously registered? I was kind of amazed that we just have this knowledge.
Yeah, so from previous years, if anybody has licensed their dog, we assume that they still have the dog and they still live in town. And when we send out those notices, we make it very clear if the dog has passed away, if you no longer live in town, if the dog is no longer yours, anything like that, let us know and we'll remove you from the records and you won't get any more notifications from us. There are people who have never licensed their dogs, and unless there's an issue, if there's a dog bite, if there's an issue and somebody calls the animal control officer and the dog's never been licensed, they're running that risk. But we have no way of knowing if somebody's never licensed their dog and there's never been an issue with their dog.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful.
Thank you, Hillary. Oh no, Liz has a question. You never know what's going to cause all of the time.
What about new people who have dogs? How do they get informed? Through their vet?
I would imagine that their vets let them know. I personally don't have a dog, so I haven't experienced that. I believe that most vets let them know, or if they're adopting the dog, most places let them know that they need to license their dog in the town where they live. Brandy, you might have more information on that with your interaction with dogs.
Yeah, I think it's hit or miss with the vets tell you or not. I think most people who've had dogs for a while just know, and I've had dogs for a long time, so I don't really remember how the conversation first came up. Probably my parents or something, I don't know. Sorry.
Daniel, he said exasperated.
I just wanted to annoy Tim. One of the good things about this list is that you get to see all of the different names of dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. That is fun.
Bagel. Good name for a dog. There are also
Bagel.
2 dogs named Brooklyn. I wonder if they know each other.
Yeah, that's fun. I like this.
And you also get to see who owns which dog, and you're like, oh, I know that person.
But there's also colors I don't recognize, like brindle.
What?
Oh,
That's
they're
like
pretty.
a common pit bull boxer color with the striping.
It's like marble.
About to turn 53.
Like a tortoiseshell?
Yeah. No, well, it's more like a stripe, but yes, the same colors as tortoiseshell.
Everybody raise their hand if they've heard the term brindle.
It's in like a rhyme.
Oh, Ian, at least young Ian hasn't heard it.
Wendy jumped on.
On the board.
Both
Great.
That's my pet name for Ian. Sorry, that'll make the paper tomorrow.
Front page.
Young Ian, I just like that. It's endearing.
Uh,
Okay.
Can we go till 10 o'clock again next week?
No.
Yeah.
No,
Thank you, Hillary.
cannot.
Thank you very much, Hillary.
Quick fingers bringing Hillary on. Okay, so we have one more thing. Wait, we need to do something.
You do.
I'm not doing it.
Oh, no. I left.
Somebody do something.
I'll do it.
So-
I'll do it
I'll
in
do
a
it.
second.
Oh,
Okay.
go ahead, Daniel.
No, go ahead. I needed to reload the document. If you have it open, go right ahead.
Okay. I move to approve the annual dog warrant as presented.
Thanks, Liz. Liz has moved to approve the annual dog warrant as presented. And all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Randy voted for it this time. I think that's a first. Didn't
Oh,
you vote
crap,
against
you're
it?
right. I should have stayed
Didn't
with
you
my
vote
track.
against it?
Don't you think dogs need to be licensed?
Brandy's the
Okay,
dog
voting
murderer.
Principle of the language.
Is in favor of destroying. No, never mind.
I'm
Not
not in
gonna
favor
happen.
of destroying
Doesn't
dogs.
happen. Not gonna happen.
Not gonna
Not gonna happen.
We have one remaining duty as a board, and it's 9:59.
Where is it?
So
Would you like me to read them? I've got them in front of me.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes,
really?
please.
There's a lot of them. You don't mind?
I don't mind.
Jesus.
We have a committee and board vacancies for everyone to apply for.
And these are for appointments for the new year, the new fiscal year of the town beginning in July. So we'll be receiving applications and likely we'll have some appointments, possibly even some interviews for June 16th and then into the July meetings. So that when I say the number of vacancies, it's the number of vacancies effective as of July 1st. On the ADA Advisory Committee, there are 5 members, 4 of which will be vacant, for 5 seats, 4 of which will be vacant. The Arts Committee, 7 members, 4 of which will be vacant. The Brattleboro Housing Partnerships Board of Commissioners, there are 5 members and the town appoints 1 member, so that 1 seat will be vacant. Cemetery Committee has 5 members, 2 of which are vacant seats. Citizens Police Communications Committee, 5 seats and 3 of those are vacant. Conservation Commission, 7 members and there are 3 vacancies. Design Review Committee, 3 members, 1 seat vacant. Design Review Committee alternate, 1 position, which will be vacant. The Development Review Board, 7 members and 3 vacancies. Development Review Board alternate, there are 3 positions, all of which will be vacant. Energy Committee, 7 members, 4 of which are vacant. Fence Viewers, 3, all of which are vacant. Honor Roll, 3 members, all of which are vacant. Inspector of Lumber, Shingles, and Wood, 1, and that is vacant. The Nelson E. Withington Fund Advisory Committee, 2 members, both positions are vacant. Planning Commission, 7 members and 2 vacancies. Recreation and Parks Board, 7 members and 4 vacancies. Rescue Inc. Trustee, 1 position, and it will be vacant. Senior Solutions Advisory Council, 1 or 2 positions, and either 1 or both will be vacant. Traffic Safety Committee, 1 position that is the Chamber's representative. That position is becoming vacant. The Chamber will recommend someone to the Select Board for appointment. And the Tree Advisory Committee has 5 members, 3 vacant seats. And the last is the Weigher of Coal, where 1 member is allowed per the town's charter, but 2 members are allowed by statute. There have been times when the town had 1 and other times when the town had 2, and that seat or seats will be vacant as of July 1st.
Okay,
Thank you,
Wow.
Judy.
thank you.
A lot of opportunities for serving your town. If anybody's still with us, that is. I don't know who I'm talking to at this point.
Well, that'll be the front page news, won't it? The list of vacancies in the committees.
Yeah.
I challenge all of our press to make that the front page. We'll see.
Absolutely. Well, good work, everyone. What do we have a motion to return us to our? Well, we're in our homes. Let's face it. Liz.
I move to adjourn.
Thanks, Liz. All those in favor of adjournment?
Hi.
Looks like 5-0. Oh, hi, Wendy.
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 Hi, Wendy.
Wendy's staying on.